Hi. I'm already dead behind the eyes, can you tell? I'm Kendall. If you're new around here, welcome. If you're not new around here, what is up, home skillet biscuit? And 3 years ago, I started talking about a series of movies that are incredibly niche, and I don't think anyone's watched it but people that perhaps have seen my videos, because who the f else watched every single movie of Gabriel's Inferno? But about 2 years ago, 5 films into the 9 film series, I just kind of gave up. I was getting so underwhelmed by the movies and they were boring me to bits. And eventually I said to myself, well, I'll just wait until all the rest of the movies come out and maybe I'll make a video then. Well, it's been 2 years, almost 3, since the last time I made a video, and 4 more movies have come out. And so today, I figure we would do a walk down memory lane, because I assume a lot of you that have clicked on this video haven't seen my previous 5 videos about them, which you can check out separately if you want to. But what I'm going to do is edit them into the first part of this video so that you can be fully caught up with the saga that is Gabriel's Inferno. For your ease and your comfort, this will probably be a very long video. Good falling asleep, cleaning your house, making dinner video. You're welcome. I love these too. So we're going to do a walk down memory lane. You can see how I used to do my edges and my lace. We've grown. You don't have to comment on it. I really hope you don't. I think we should all together act like it didn't happen. Wait, how my lace look today? In person, it looks fine, but on camera, it's probably rough. Anyway, we're gonna ignore that as well too, if it looks bad. So we're gonna sit here, do our walk down memory lane on the first 5 videos so that you can be up to date with the shenanigans that is Gabriel's Inferno. And then hopefully we can just close this book. Not that anybody else remembered it was open but me, but yes, close this book. That's the key for today, because I watched all 4 videos. Spoiler, they're very underwhelming. But at least I can say I finished it. You know, you build confidence in finishing things when you actually finish them. You know, prove to yourself that you can do something, Kendall. So yes, let's send it over to Admiral Kennie, and we can get this show on the road. This road on the show. Here's an ad. Hello everyone, it's Admiral Kennie, and today's video is sponsored by Skillshare. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives with a wide depth and breadth of topics ranging from illustration, graphic design, photography, music, marketing, productivity, and much more. I think one of the things that keeps life interesting is expanding your hobbies, expanding your skill sets, expanding the things that you're interested in, and turning it into like side quests or new adventures, learning a new skill or hobby, or perhaps maybe turning that into a money-making venture. You know, all those things keep life interesting, you know? Follow your mini dreams too, and your big dreams. Follow all of them. And Skillshare offers a wide range of courses that can help you go about that, as well as helps you go at the pace that is best for you. Whether you're a beginner or advanced, they have what you're looking for, baby, because they have thousands of videos that even get to the pretty niche creative interests. I saw a video on how to paint with yarn or string or something. I was like, oh, that's very specific. As we go into fall and people are back to school, I think this is a particularly great time to pick up a new hobby or skill set or creative interest. Or if you're me, you need some help, some refreshing on how to stay productive. It's weird, since I've gotten like people to help me with videos, like editing and managers and stuff like that. Weirdly enough, I feel like I'm falling more behind because there's less things that I have to do. So I just say, I'm gonna do it. And now I'm not as productive. To remember that being productive is still important, Skillshare has plenty of things that can remind me and rejuvenate me about productivity, taught by a doctor and YouTuber, Ali Abdal, who can give you some insight on how to get stuff done when you're not feeling particularly organized or motivated or whatnot. And I really appreciate it. So if you would like to check out Skillshare and all that they have to offer, you should click on the link down below, because the first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. Big thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring today's video. Now let's get on to the debauchery. Gabriel's Inferno. Part 1. I have had to rewrite my notes for this film over and over and over again. And partially it's because I am trying to do I'm quite the martyr. I am trying to make this movie make sense for you as much as I can. But if you go into this movie blind, you will be confused, probably a good 3/4 of it. And then at the end, when you find out the reason or whatever, you're like, well, that just negated the first hour and a half of this movie. That makes no sense. So, and in order to help you, here's the spoiler. Julia and Gabriel fell in love 6 years ago, and he doesn't remember it. She does. How romantic. And then on top of that, he's now her professor and falling in love with her in the present and still doesn't know who she is. They don't say anything very early in the movie that's like, I can't believe he doesn't remember me. So we're just watching it in this vague, like, I think she knows him, but they never they never let the audience know that that's the disconnect. So again, the first hour and a half, you're in this haze of confusion, but not in the way that I think they were trying to keep this lore of like, oh my God, what is the background between these two? But now it just makes everything else not make sense because, and I'm getting ahead of myself, the whole movie, there's so many signs that he should know who she is if she mattered at all. Like, not even in love, he should know who she is. But the sheer fact that he doesn't is hilarious to me because you're still trying to package this as romance. And I just, wow, okay. But in today's essay, I shall explain why A, not a great setup for a romance movie. B, makes no logistic sense. And C, explain why this was so poorly articulated and set up that at the end of it, when I found out that they're supposed to know each other, I just got angry. So the movie begins with a beautifully ironic and hilarious foreshadowing even of my experience with this film. And the opening theme, for some reason, is Mozart's Lacrimosa. Choir bitches arise. Like Lacrimosa. As in the Requiem. As in the songs sung at funerals and are about death. Pardon? What? Why? Of all the songs to start off a romance with, you chose a requiem. You chose a song about death. And not only that, it ends up being like this reoccurring theme, like a song that plays here and there throughout the movie. And I'm not sure how they're trying to use this because I haven't watched the other two movies. But let's say I give the movie more credit and suggest that they meant it to be like sort of an Easter egg to allude that this love will not survive and it will not make sense. This love is meant to die. But I suppose I won't know until the end of the last movie. But if it has anything to do with the other PASSIONFLIX films and how they kind of go about things, it's not looking great. Ooh, as a side note, hearing Lacrimosa reminded me that years ago when I was in high school, I discovered a dancey jazz version of Dies Irae, and it is the most comically hilarious and pretentious joke. Just shaking ass for the Requiem. Our main protagonist, again, is Julianne, or Julia, a tiny grad student taking up Dante-focused Italian literature. Her new professor is our titular character, Gabriel Emerson, the tall, conventionally attractive man with a sexy Italian accent and a deep-seated fiery rage that we're supposed to understand is attractive because he's tall, white, and conventionally attractive, whereas I find it equally as disconcerting as any other context of just an always angry man. And the opening scene is giving me very decently budgeted porno. The tall, domineering, masculine teacher is scolding the innocent, chaste student. And this is one of many reasons why I just simply can't get jiggy with this film, because the foundation of their relationship, at least in the present, is that he is her teacher, i.e. a direct authority figure, and she is a student, and I'm just supposed to forget that. I'm just supposed to forget the particular dynamic that presents, because every romantic quote-unquote thing that he does just feels like an abuse of that power at that point. You can't just say, I'm taking you to dinner to a student without there being this kind of threatening aura around that. Like, it's not like, hey, want to get lunch and we can work on a paper. There's this like, we will eat together. We shall eat together. And then it progresses further into kissing me you feel. But then again, I guess to some degree, I understand that there is an element of like power play dynamics for someone that consumes contents like this. This might be like a cute little power play fantasy for you. But I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't, if I didn't at least say in real life, this would be very different. But after this scolding, again, in a very porno flick type way, he says, come to my office after class. At the end of class, the guy that was sitting next to her introduces himself. His name is Paul. And he is effectively going to be like the nice guy. He notices that she is new to the department. He introduces himself, says that he works with Gabriel, but just gives a bunch of exposition about how awful Gabriel is and how he's always angry at everybody. And he's kind of known for having a temper, which is okay. Sexy. But yeah, for all intents and purposes, he's presented as the other guy, the non-Dahmer McDomison, which means he's not abusive. So justice for Paul. At least in this movie, I don't know, he might be terrible in other movies, but in this one he seemed pretty cool. But she doesn't want Paul. She wants the dude with the anger issues. We accept the love we think we deserve and all that. But Julia goes to Gabriel's office and finds the door partially closed and him arguing on the phone with somebody. And I use the word arguing in like quotations in the sense that the man is a very bad actor.
I loved her too.
I don't know what time because I don't know what kind of flight I can get, but I'll be there.
Just tell him I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
But I don't know if that's because he's just inherently a bad actor or he does have quite a thick Italian accent. And I believe that is his actual Italian accent. I don't think he's putting on an Italian accent. If I recall correctly, I looked up the actor and he is actually Italian. So I think this might be just a language thing that makes him particularly seem so uncomfortable. But regardless, very uncomfortable the whole movie. And as we'll find out later, Gabriel was adopted at like 9 years old. So he shouldn't have an Italian accent theoretically unless, you know, he was just really stuck in there. But he's arguing with somebody, and from context clues, you can tell that someone may have passed, but we don't really know who or the circumstances around that. So seeing that he's having quite an intimate conversation, she decides to just leave a note that says, I'm sorry, and doesn't come to the actual meeting. Now, apparently, Julia already has a photo that seems to be quite personal, right, of Gabriel. And on my first viewing, I was like, well, that's creepy. I was thinking, oh, this is about to be a whole different type of movie than I was expecting. I was like, oh, we going into the stalker route. Okay, cool. I didn't know that's what I was going into, but of course not, because that would insinuate it being an actually eventful movie. But again, being that I've already told you the spoiler, it's because she already knows Gabriel. He is actually the brother of her best friend from high school. Oh, is that why he was so mean to her in the beginning when he was her professor? And it's like, no, he's just like that to everybody. He's just a dick. He didn't even remember her. But she gets a call from her father and he lets her know that Rachel, the high school friend, her mother passed. He says to Julia that he went over to their house and, quote, Gabriel wasn't there. So they're referring to him by first name. And so, follow me, I'm about to get angry. You're telling me that she was best friends with his sister, close enough that her father would visit their house. She knew him and her father knew him as Gabriel. They knew him by name. They have a moment in which they, quote, fall in love and he doesn't remember her. And I'm supposed to still feel romantic feelings about their reconnection. That is why I'm mad. This is just terrible storytelling. The next day, Julia goes to check her mailbox and she sees that she has a note. The note specifically that she left at Gabriel's office that said, I'm sorry. Apparently on the other side, it said, Emerson's an ass, because Paul had actually written on that paper on the first side, and which was funny. It was funny, I'm not gonna lie. So there's a disciplinary meeting held for this, which is hilarious. I've said some pretty out-of-pocket things about my teachers to their faces, and I never But yeah, they hold a disciplinary meeting for her calling him an ass. Like, y'all are like adults. Like, she trips, and I have this realization. I'm like, oh God, did I fall back into the 50 Shades of Grey universe? I thought I had escaped you. Damn it, man. Gabriel's just ornery, and it's the most unnatural, like, anger progression I've ever seen. And there was something about this particular scene that reminded me so much of my, like, school experience because, hello, I'm an asshole. And and that tends to come out particularly in situations where I have like a male authority figure who's very pompous, and I can't help but call the bluff. It's a sickness. I really don't know how to just let it go. The amount of times I've been in a situation where I've had like a male teacher just go on and on about how, like, you know, not explicitly, but just basically saying how great they are. And I can't let them go without saying I noticed it. I noticed the bullshit. For some reason, they've always taken it as charm, which is hilarious. I should email my one professor. I know he found this channel. What's up? Yep, this is what happened with all that believing in me. This is what I did with it. With all that bright future and expensive education, I make videos on the internet. Anyway, I say this to say that I would have laughed at him. I probably wouldn't have cussed him out, but I probably would have been like, are you serious? Because I can't. But he's like super pissy and combative for no reason. And he's like, at the end of it, you drop things and you annoy me. This isn't going to work. Change majors. And again, I was so confused because I was like, is it because he recognizes her? No, he just don't like that she dropped things. Whenever I do red eyeshadow, I always think of Sweeney Todd. And in my head, all I can hear right now is, poor thing, better you should think that she died. Yes, I lied, cause I love you. I'd be twice the wife she was. I love you. How could that thing have cared for you like me? Mrs. Lovett, what a charming notion. But yeah, Gabriel's just ornery and irritated all the time for no real reason. And I'm like, do you need a hug? And then at the end of it, he's like, you dropped things. You missed a meeting. We can't work together. I don't want to work together. Maybe you should even drop out. And again, based off of how strong of a reaction this was, I thought that maybe he did recall that there was a thing between them and that angered him or something. It was confusing to me, but apparently no. He just had to stick up his ass, and that's just the story plot. It's like, okay. So distraught and saddened, Julia walks home, and it starts to rain, and she ends up getting just drowned in it. And then in an act of guilt or kindness, whatever, he picks her up and gives her a ride back to her place, at which he kind of invites himself inside right after like berating her and saying, well, drop out. It's like, ooh, this sequence of events, I was so like whiplashed. I was like, huh? Who's what? One, he is your teacher, which should be enough to not invite yourself into their home. Two, once he gets in there, he's hella rude. He was like, oh, you live in a bucket. Like, what? Like, how do you live like this? And he recognizes at some point, oh man, I'm sorry, I'm being rude. Mayday! Oh God, too much glue. But she's like, it's okay. You just lost your mom. As if that's like an excuse to be an asshole. And then after I watched it the first time and came back to it, I realized how stupid of a line this was. Because recall, how would she know that information? She's just his student and he doesn't think. How do you know that? Again, he does not remember her, doesn't think they've ever met, but she, a random student, knows intimately that he just lost a family member, and particularly that it's his mom. If she was even listening in on his phone call before, she wouldn't have known it was his mother. Overwhelmed, he leaves. Then he immediately comes back, invites her to a steak dinner, or I should say, tells her we're going to have a steak dinner.
I'm starving, and you're joining me for dinner.
And again, I understand that the intent was for him to be like, sexy, take charge, man, dom, manly man. But again, he's her professor. So when I hear him say, you are joining me for dinner, not even like, hey, are you hungry? You want to get something to eat? Like, you know, if you were, presumably if he's like your professor or something, and like, that's very normal to like get coffee with a professor, or like, hey, I'm hungry, you want to get some food? And it's like, okay, yeah, it's a very normal thing. But the assertion of, you are meeting me for dinner, feels like an implied or else. You feel anything that's supposed to be cute and him taking charge, it feels like a threat. And I'm still confused about the response that y'all want me to have, especially because we've already established that he has an anger issue. So, romance? Question mark? Okay, cool.
Tell me why, after everything you've said to me, should I join you?
Because Emerson is an ass.
God.
But at least now he knows it.
Shut But yeah, she gets dressed. They go to a fancy restaurant. This is progressing very quickly, especially for people that are supposed to be strangers in his mind. But they go to a fancy Italian restaurant. She impresses the owner with her Italian, as well as Gabriel. They play displaced campfire song music as she sips wine. She tells him that the reason why she's studying Dante is because someone she knew introduced him to her, and the story of him and Beatrice. Hint, hint. And this should remind him of something, yeah? But it doesn't. He's just like, oh, wow, it's crazy. Girl, if I was her, I would just give up. I would have took it like, well, that wasn't important to him at all. Okay. I'm over here studying this because of him, which I hope not. I hope it just sparked a genuine interest and she just found her own love for it. But in case she did study this for him, bitch, don't do anything for a man. Don't change jobs. Don't change locations. Don't change any plans for a man. My God, don't change schools. So the friend from high school, Rachel, and of course, Gabriel's adopted sister, comes to town to visit Gabriel, and they run into each other and she's like, oh my God, my best friend from high school. Nah. And Gabriel sees them talking. His sister says she was my best friend from high school. She has now said that she started this because somebody brought up Dante and Beatrice to her, who is now in front of him taking his class about Dante, and he still doesn't remember. Now you see why this movie was driving me insane. The first time I watched it, I was just confused. I was like, wait, what's happening? Then I watched it a second time and I was like, oh, this is just stupid, poorly written, and it's just so grating on my nerves. I'm sorry. And each time I had to watch it to make this video, I noticed more things that showed me that this movie is stupid. Rachel notices that there's like a vibe between them. It feels a little bit of animosity is forming, and she's like, whatever problems you have, get over it. I'm seeing both of you while I'm here.
He ends up showing her this super important and rare book, something about Dante, whatever. He's like, no one knows that I have this but my lawyers and now you. And it's like, why are you telling her this?
But it's like, oh my God, they're getting closer, I guess. I don't know. There's a wine incident that results in Julia breaking a glass, and for some reason her first response is to pick it up with her bare hands. He nurses her back to health. More confusing dialogue where the sister is like, don't hurt her, she's been hurt before. And it's like, what the where did that come from? Like, what? You need to treasure her for the treasure that she is. And it's like, that's his student. Like, I don't have to do anything but teach her stuff. Like in the classroom, like nothing outside of that. There's no double entendre with that. He ends up saying something along the lines of like, why didn't you tell me that you were friends with my sister? I would have been nicer to you. And her response to it is like, I'm happy you took your wrath out on me as opposed to someone else. Or he can just stop being a dick to everybody. That may also be an option. Let's not close the book on that option in particular. It's like everyone around him feels like he's entitled to be an asshole, and he's not. You don't have to martyr yourself for him being whatever.
I have a bad temper.
Oh, no.
And I can be destructive. It would be inadvisable for me to lose my temper on someone like you.
Or you could get some help. Therapy does wonders. Really, I'm so tired. I'm so done.
I'm not very good at resisting temptation.
So then we get a flashback to finally tell us what is the history that they have with each other. 6 years ago. Ooh. Is the beginning of a lot of can of worms if we're not careful, because this scene is actually very creepy to me. Like this entire like flashback is really creepy to me. At best, it's just really, really creepy, and at worst, it could possibly be somewhat pedophilic. And that's on top of all of the disorienting romanticization of him being really angry and abusive and his bad tracks. That was also, it was too much going on at the same time. I don't know how old Julia is in any part of this movie, but if I had to guess, you're a master's student. You're, give or take, 23, 24. Do the math. She could be anywhere between 17 or 18. Age ain't nothing but a number, but a jail cell ain't nothing but a room with bars. You feel me? It's very creepy. It's very freaking creepy. Even best case scenario, and she is of age. I'm looking at him as a professor, and he's giving me like 35, 36. So 6 years ago, you were late 20s, talking to someone who is either not of age or just barely. But essentially, one day, 6 years ago, Julia goes over Rachel's house, again, her best friend from high school, and she's comfortable enough to just go into her house, which again ruins the idea that you didn't know who she was, because she was close enough that she was just walking through your doors. But okay, she comes to the house, and basically Gabriel, who she refers to by first name, so she knows him well enough to say, I know who Gabriel is. But apparently she's over there to console Rachel because Gabriel just had another tantrum. This time, it resulted in him pushing his parents, breaking things, throwing somebody into a table who is now in the ER. And this is the beginning of their love story. Please stop turning violent men and men with really bad tempers into sexy anti-heroes. Their brokenness is not sexy. It's not a way to prove a woman's capability of healing someone with her pussy. Then... This isn't funny, but it made me laugh. In a great display of wonderful writing again, Rachel lets us know, in case we didn't know, that her family is broken by saying, my family's so broken.
My family is so broken.
Kudos, great writing. Love that. So Julia goes outside to console him, and it's just looking at them together. It's like, why did they do that to him? Like, outfit-wise, that's just hideous. Oh my God. It just feels like a 35-year-old snuck into all alternative societies at the same time. Like, he snuck into the e-boy kids who were anime kids, who were K-pop fans, who are also probably in some way associated with scene kids and goth kids. It just feels like this early 2000s ball of deception, just all in this one thing. But then outside of that, they were able to age her down a little bit. She looks younger. And them sitting next to each other and the following events also perpetuates the concern I have. Like, how old is she? Because she looks young, and he's giving like 40-year-old down on his luck Chance Crawford after a DUI. Now, I can't explicitly say this is pedo in a technical sense, but this conversation feels very pedo adjacent, pedo light. He'll remark several times where he's like, I'm so happy I'm the first whatever boy to hold your hand, your first kiss. There's something very fucking creepy about that. And I don't know what response and feelings they wanted me to have, and it's driving me nuts. So like, again, even if she's not underage, there is this element of him getting off on being the first person to do any of these things with her, and I find that inherently creepy. Anyway, I can go on and on and on, but again, this whole scene just sent me spiraling. I was like, what am I? But okay, let's assume that she's of age and yada yada yada, and he's not in his late 20s. But he continues to say things that are like emphasizing how like young, naive, and innocent she is. He's like, have you ever held a boy's hand? I'm glad I'm your first. He calls her Dante's muse, Beatrice, which is where she keeps bringing this up throughout the movie. He basically explains that Dante had fallen in love with Beatrice when she was, quote, still very young. And he just loved her from afar. I don't know. They just look like Chris Hansen is going to pop out from behind a tree and be like, what's going on here? We have your text log. Do you enjoy those week-old cookies? They kiss after he again makes sure that he knows that he's her first kiss as well. Is this crying? What? Wait, what? Ooh, this is just funky. And he just goes on and on about how he's been waiting his whole life for her, that she's his Beatrice, and that he loves her, but that he must go to somewhere out there because he can't be here, and one day for her to come find him in hell.
My only hope is that you find me one day. Look for me in hell.
He went off the deep end so quickly. and he don't remember you. And I'm sitting here losing my mind for other reasons outside of the obvious, like, really creepiness of this whole thing, and just really, like, I'm losing my mind because I'm trying to understand if he was referring to himself when he was talking about the Dante looking at her from afar and loving her all his life, blah, blah. So are you telling me you've been doing that, which is creepy? Reminder, because that means she was definitely underage at some point. He was looking at her from afar, yearned for her, knew of her as his sister's best friend, does this big confession about how he's always felt for her and that she's his muse and his Beatrice and yada yada, but I have to go and come find me. You're telling me that man 6 years later doesn't recognize her when she becomes his student, when he's reminded that that's his sister's friend, but apparently they never met because that's what the sister says, but how could they not have? When she says that she started because she had a love for Dante and Beatrice, because somebody she knew was really interested and started talking to her about it, as they're falling in love currently, and he still does not remember. He literally just says that to everybody. I believe that. And I just get more and more confirmation of that throughout the rest of the movie. Because again, there's more situations that you should remember her in unless you say this to literally every woman you meet. They've been playing the Requiem, Lacrimosa, over and over again throughout the movie. And they particularly play it when she receives a gift from him. Which is hilarious because again, unless this is meant to be like he will be her undoing and her death, and she's not catching all the red flags I'm catching. If it's meant to say like everything he does feels like a little bit closer to death, then sure. But if not that, hey. But they go to a club because there's always a club scene for some reason. But yeah, that sounds fun, going clubbing with my angry professor. But Julia talks about Paul and Gabriel gets jealous. She dances with another man and Gabriel gets jealous. He offers her a taste of his whiskey, which again, I'm supposed to believe is supposed to be sexy, but though she says no, and he's like, I insist. In a very like creepy, pushy way, he's like, drink it. And I'm just sitting there like, he definitely roofed it. And then to put a pin in that creep factor I was saying from 6 years ago, he remarks about how he can tell that she's a virgin. Stop pretending to be anything else, which would have been creepy already. But you add in that extra dynamic that this is her professor. Bitch, oh no. Gabriel gets jealous at something else and pins her against a wall. She says something like super melodramatic along the lines of like, why don't you just stick a knife in my heart and get it over with? And I'm just like, please do. Like, damn, me too. Gang, get me out of this misery. Like, this movie will not end. They dance, and I gotta admit, this is my favorite part of the movie. This is the only part that I find just so entertaining because there is this like comedically bad and very distracting version of Bésame Mucho. That's the accent that she sung the song in. So you can imagine. I don't speak Spanish and I know that was a bad Spanish. Bésame, bésame mucho, como si fueras de noche la última vez. Perdete después. And admittedly, it was so distracting that I didn't hear nothing they were talking about during this. I had to replay that like 8 times. I'm like, I cannot hear over bésame. After I played it like 8 times, I realized that the conversation is him basically like, I'm not being professor tonight. That you made that decision all by yourself because And then, as if to drive me insane, me specifically, it feels very personal. He says, well, you look very familiar. You reminds me of Dante's Beatrice. Are you sure that Rachel never introduced us before? That solidified it. That solidified that he just says this to everybody. He literally just says it to every brown-haired white woman he meets. At some point, the next day or something, the sister gives the rundown about how he was just left as a sea urchin by his family. Street urchin, not sea urchin. Jesus. I imagine, see, this is what's wrong with my mind. Immediately when I said sea urchin, I imagined him like as a small child, as a sea urchin, dressed, just wandering No! Oh, man, okay. As a street urchin. Fuck me. Oh, man. As a street urchin. And they adopted him at 9 years old, which again, why he has that accent. Also, whose hospital was he outside? Were they just in Italy and they stole a child? I just thought about that. Where did he, anyway, whew, girl, Kendall, just finish the video. They found him wandering outside of a hospital. When his birth father died, he, for some reason that nobody is aware of, left him a crazy amount of money, so he's actually very rich. So, you know, we had to make sure that was taken care of, because there's no way that we can have a romance without a rich, conventionally attractive white man with anger issues that we must romanticize and coddle and cure with love. It's the whole romance novel starter pack. Julia goes for coffee with Paul, gives him an awkward kiss, then sees Gabriel, and then when she sees him, she feels guilty for kissing Paul, and Paul is like, I don't mind staying friends. Like, we can stay friends. I'm not trying to pressure you into anything. That's fine. And if you change your mind, you know, let me know. So like a really nice guy, really great, understanding guy, but nope. I look like a hot who. He gets super drunk at night for some reason, and I forget why, who cares. And Julia helps him out, takes him to his house. He does another thing that I think they wanted me to think is sexy and thrilling, but just greatly scared me.
So you can sleep it off now. Come
Kiss
on.
me goodnight. And I go to bed like a good little boy.
Please don't hurt me.
And then they kiss. He then commences to vomit on her and on himself. Romance. She changes into his clothes, changes him out of his clothes because it's all covered in vomit. She puts him to bed. He gets a phone call and hears a woman's voice who's very angry to hear her voice, and she starts calling her a whore and stuff, but that's not important because we have more important things. He's gonna remember that she's Beatrice. And that, I guess, makes us forget that a woman is just like calling her out on her name and that she may be a relationship of his, but okay, doesn't matter. He remembered me as Beatrice, bitch! There's sappy moments. He's like, oh my God, I love you. And then they fall asleep, cuddled in each other's arms. Next morning, she's on cloud nine. She's like, I'm gonna make him breakfast. I'm gonna write him a cute little note and sign it, your Beatrice. And in the morning, he does not remember any of that. He does not remember her as Beatrice. He does not remember anything. He's like, what the hell are you doing here? Why are you in my clothes? Why are we naked? What happened? And at first I was very confused by this. I thought, did he think that she had like taken advantage of him, and which is a fair enough concern to have, but apparently he was more concerned that he had taken advantage of her. I was afraid that I was rough with you because you're so innocent. You're so He apologizes for kissing her. Why did you refer to yourself as Beatrice in the note? You told me to come look for you in hell. Well, that's where you can stay. And then he's like, oh bitch. And she says as the elevator closes, I'm not your Beatrice anymore. Thank God. Thank God. It's, oh my God, thank God it's over. I have never been so, that's not true. I was about to lie. It's been, has it been a while? I don't know. It feels like each week, the last week just fades into the ether. It feels like a new sense of frustration while watching this movie. I think I haven't been this annoyed watching a romance since, probably 365 days. Yeah. That's the last romance, quote unquote, that broke me. I feel like I'm that level of frustration, but it's in a different way. That one, it was trying to make me think that kidnapping was hot. This one is just, it's all of the things. It's so bad and also frustrating, and it was boring. I don't think I really even hit on that. I had to start and stop this movie. This is not the first time I've seen this movie, by the way. Me preparing for this. I've seen this movie when I first discovered PASSIONFLIX. So I've seen this a long time ago, but it was so boring that I could not focus on it. It's so hard to make a movie so bad that I physically can't watch it. They've done it. And when I finally did sit there and watch it over and over and over again, I just got angry. I just want reparations in the form of a time machine where I can get all of that time back. And it hurts me because I know we're not close enough to that yet. Alas, I'm just left with the broken pieces. Gabriel's Inferno, and today we're watching Gabriel's Inferno Part 2. So this movie takes place right after the end of the first movie. They start off the film with the exact same animation of Lacrimosa. Like they didn't even change the paintings. The only thing they do is just put bitches part 2. So in fairness, PASSIONFLIX isn't big on editing anyway, so it shouldn't surprise me. Julia has ended her little, I don't even know if I want to call it a relationship, but her situation with Gabriel. again, her professor. They ended their relationship for a whole host of reasons. Watch the first video, I don't have time. And Gabriel's like, I want you back. I need you back. Baby, please, baby, please. Calling her, he's leaving messages, he's leaving flowers at her door. Again, baby, please take me back, baby, please. Julia's certainly in the like rage phase of the breakup, end of situationship. She decides to take a few days off of class to avoid Gabriel. Meanwhile, Gabriel is just kind of bitching that she won't talk to him. She ends up sending Gabriel a professional email that says basically, stop harassing me, stop texting me, stop calling me. I will basically complain to the complaint office or whoever you tell when your teacher is a predator. I don't know. I mean, if you recall from the last video, I thought this was a bad idea in general. He gives me predator vibes for a lot of reasons. From the jump, nothing has been particularly sexy about this dynamic, as much as this movie seems to want me to believe that there is. But basically, fed up with all his BS, she's like, I need a new advisor, leave me alone. I'm even willing to give back my scholarship. I just don't want to talk to you ever again. And I get it, I ain't giving back the scholarship, but you know, all the other stuff, I definitely get it. She does ultimately return to class, checks her mailbox to find her own bra shoved in an envelope. If you recall, in the first movie, she had left her bra accidentally at his house. It wasn't because they had sex or anything. She's a virgin, because of course she is in any romance. Every single romance has to have a virgin female protagonist. Another thing we need to have is, of course, a poorly laid out love triangle. This consists of Paul, who is great. I love Paul. Paul was great in the first movie. He's still great in this one. Not a great actor or anything, but you know, like as a character, he's like nice, he's patient, he's kind. He does like her and he's made that clear, but he's also said basically that he values her friendship and he'll stick around. Pick him, he's so much better. Anyway, he took a trip to Princeton, brought her back a gift, and she ends up hugging him. Gabriel sees. And this only compiles upon his already foul mood that he's had since she's been ignoring him. This foul mood and animosity between the two of them bubbles over into the actual classroom, and it's some of the most uncomfortable. Because I just sat there thinking the whole time, ooh, if this was me in this classroom, I would put my pencil down, honey. I have nothing to write about. I have nothing to look at. I have nothing to pay attention to. Let the games begin. Because they go into the classroom, and from the beginning, Gabriel's like, in like this weird power play, he's like, see me after class, where have you been? And she's like, oh, I have plans with Paul. I'll let you know when I'm free. And he's like, okay, fine, whatever. And then he starts the lecture about none other than Dante and Beatrice. And I guess they just don't learn about nothing else in this in this class. He basically concludes that the reason why the relationship would have never worked was simply because Beatrice, Julia, was at fault. She didn't look for him. She didn't care about him. She just acted like she did. She just left him. She was a frigid bitch, and that's why their relationship didn't work out.
Where was Beatrice? Dante waited years for her. She knew where he lived. She knew his family. If she cared about him, why did she make no attempt to contact him?
Julia, in response, basically says Dante, Gabriel, was a grown-ass man, and she was not, which answered a question that I had from the first movie. If you recall, I was saying, like, was she of age? And he was like making out with her in a field and flowers and shit. Like, was she of age? And she knew that they couldn't be together.
Dante met her when she was under 18. It wasn't possible for them to be together unless he's a pedophile. Are you telling us that Dante is a pedophile, Professor?
Well, it kind of just alluded to her possibly being barely legal during their first moments of, quote, falling in love. And it was just very, very, very creepy, but there was no solid evidence. You know what I mean? So for me, we could honestly just end the movie here, because I don't want to hear anything from the pedophile about how he wasn't a pedophile when he was doing pedophile. But they keep going. I was like, okay, so how are you going to defend yourself? What are you going to say? He basically says, no, I just had a lot of affection.
He had true affection for her. If she had ever had the courage to ask him, he would have told her that.
So yeah, you were like, what? And then they somehow just skirt from this conversation and get on to how if he loved her so much in the time they were away, he wouldn't have had sex with so many other women, especially the woman that called her a slut and a whore in the last movie because she was over his house at night. Baby, let's keep our eye on the ball, keep our eyes on the prize. You have a perfectly good man who's not a pedophile sitting right next to you, who values you as a person, as a friend, and we accept the love we think we deserve, and it's just so true every day, and it hurts so much. Now, after this incredibly subtle and not at all personal argument in front of all these other students, Gabriel says to come to his office because, of course, this movie is just basically a slow burn porno, at which he yells at her, reprimanding her for bringing up Paulina, who is the woman that cussed her out over the phone.
You wanted me to behave like every other abusive asshole that has knocked you around. Well, I'm not an abusive asshole.
I mean, this is up for debate.
You seem to be the only person capable of pushing all my buttons, and I do mean all of them.
Nigga, you are always mad. What are you talking about? But this argument is just the precursor to, honestly, the most uncomfortable and breathy, like it just looked like a stank, makeup and make out scene I've seen in a while. It was impressively bad, and it's long. I will say this movie has some of the longest, most uncomfortable makeout scenes, because it's like, again, this was the problem I had with the first movie. They do all this stuff that I'm supposed to ignore, should be deeply troubling, and then just cover it up with a really, really long makeout scene. And it's like, okay, cool. I'm tired. I'm so exhausted. It's just incredibly melodramatic and overdone. And I guess, again, we're just gonna ignore the gnawing question of his pedophilia. But okay, cool. Romance.
I love the way you say my name, Beatrice.
I'm not Beatrice.
This is so musty. Oh my God. He make a musty ass dinner and give her some musty ass flowers, in which there is a musty ass card that tells her that if there's anything you want to know about how I feel about you, just ask Beatrice, because that's the nickname. Again, if you haven't seen the first video, this is all very confusing.
We'll save the rest for mimosas tomorrow.
Breakfast. Very sure of yourself, Casanova?
Your virtue is safe with me.
This nigga talk like a supervillain. Rest, little one, for your virtue is safe with me indeed.
I won't let you me.
Oh my God.
One doesn't an angel.
So Dracula over here is like, I just really want to get to know you, like who you actually are. I've been obsessed with you, so they say, for the last 6 years, and I would really like to know who you really are. And then when she's rightfully apprehensive, as anyone else would be, he basically says, don't try my patience.
Is it too hard to believe that I want to take my time?
Yes.
Your prejudice is warranted to some degree, but don't deliberately try my patience.
I really want to spend this time and get to know you. Not too much time. I got shit to do, but nah, eat some cake and forget about how abusive this interaction is. This movie has a very interesting quality in that it's supposed to be a romance, but it actually comes off more like a horror, and because of that, it feels like a comedy. It is the most peculiar thing. But Nosferatu over here is like, I want you in my bed tonight. Not sexually. Kendall, edit in the clip of Wendell.
I hit that sexually.
But he's like, you can sleep in my bed and I'll sleep out on the couch because I'm not a rapist, and I feel like I really need to prove that to you. Outside of just not being a rapist, I guess. But she's, you know, drawn to him, moth to a flame, so she goes to sleep next to him regardless. While going to his bedroom, she told him that she noticed he had taken down some of his photos that he kept in the room before. He used to collect like tasteful nudes in his house, and he took them down. He was, quote, ashamed of them if he were to have an angel in his bed. Puritans are some of the creepiest motherfuckers I've ever seen. It's like, what is he talking? That's a grown-ass woman. We talked a bit about in the first movie how he has a tendency to refer to her in this very infantilized way, and I just find it very, very, very creepy. And now that we've confirmed he is indeed a pedophile, this only proves my point more. In the middle of the night, she has a nightmare about a man named Simon, and we find out later that that's apparently her ex, whom she has a lot of trauma surrounding around. We don't really know what that trauma is. She wakes up the next morning, sees him in the kitchen, and he's receiving her lovingly. And she basically says that I have no idea if when I see you, you will verbally abuse me or be very sweet, which romance. They both finally discussed what had happened that day in the orchard 6 years ago when he made out with a minor. Basically, she had always thought that after she had awakened on the blanket in the orchard, he was gone and that he had just left her there. And so she went back to the house never to see him again. His side of the story, which again, romance, was that he indeed did not leave her there, that he actually went to go piss next to a tree and to pick some apples. And when he got back, she was gone. I swear to God, if he dropped the apples, if he dramatically drops the apples, I'm gonna, oh my God. I hate it here. And now, the thing that really drove me to watching this movie more than anything else was the answer to this question. Why didn't he remember her? The big secret reason about why he didn't remember her from the first movie was because he was drunk and strung out on cocaine. So he thought that he had imagined her, that she was a dream. My God, what a contemporary romantic masterpiece. They go back and forth. She insists that she's not interested in dating an addict, and he says he's been clean for years. He only drinks on occasion. She basically says that she's so gung-ho about this because she has a lot of trauma associated with her mom, who was also an alcoholic, and she doesn't want to revisit that trauma. He yet again gets her to forget the very real reasons that this is just so... Should I list it? He's a pedophile. He's her professor. He forgot about her because he was strung out on cocaine, abused his family member, and sent them to the hospital. He's verbally abusive to her. Shall I go on? Like, is there more romance? Okay, this is just musty. It's the mustiest story. But to silence all of those very meaningful protests, he just kisses her on the neck and says sweet things to her. That in and of itself ends the protests. But she exerts a little bit of power by saying that she will consider dating him. And in the meantime, while she thinks it over, he is not allowed to see anybody else. Without hesitation, he agrees. And she's like, what about that Paulina chick? He says that she does not matter. And then asks who made her so insecure. Was it perhaps the Simon guy that she had a nightmare about the night before? But she refuses to go into the conversation of Simon. Gabriel goes to one of his colleagues to get advice, I suppose, on his budding relationship with Julia, basically seeing whether or not he can get fired. And yes, he can get fired. Which I gotta say, this colleague is the only guy who is a decent actor in any movie I've ever seen from PASSIONFLIX, so congrats. God among men. Fraternizing with a student will definitely get you fired. If they find out it's OV, it's Ovel, and apparently he's just like, well, I can't read, so. And so they decide to commence like this. He is her professor, and then at night they sleep in the same bed, no sex, and that just works fine, because I guess he gives her papers to his TA or something. Thanksgiving comes around, and basically both of them decide to fly back to the hometown. She talks about why she doesn't like Thanksgiving because it reminds her of her alcoholic mother, who is also incredibly abusive. They talk about other serious topics such as religion and how he feels as though he's lost his soul long ago because he, quote, committed a sin unto death. Apparently the pedophilia isn't the last straw, it's other things. But she reminds him of his humanity and that his mistakes don't fully define him as a human being, and they don't take away his chance at redemption. Is this a Twilight fanfic? Is this another Twilight fanfic? I swear to God! Oh my God! It's inescapable! At this point, Twilight is its own contemporary bacon number for romance. You take any step in any direction in contemporary romance and it will always lead back to Twilight. I hate it here. She tells him that she's still friends with Paul and she's gonna continue to be friends with Paul even though he has some weird jealous alpha pissing contest against him for some reason. He's like, he wants you, and she's like, I have no friends. Please don't let your jealousy ruin the one chance at a friendship for me. And with said friend, she goes to Gabriel's guest lecture at some other college or some event or whatever, it doesn't matter. But basically at said event, we meet, I don't know who this is. This is a professor that they refer to as Professor Payne because apparently she's really into S&M. And for some reason, everybody knows that. They just all know. So I guess they just blended the fan fiction. It's also 50 Shades of Grey and Twilight. Okay, cool. They hidden all the keynotes. But Gabriel gives his lecture, and afterwards there is a dinner that he had actually texted Julia not to come to, but She didn't get the text because her phone was off, so she ended up at the dinner anyway. At the dinner, Paul tells Julia about their secret love affair that they've had over the years and that she got him into S&M. Again, I don't know why he knows all this tea, but this is the type of nosy nigga I love. I love an oversharer. I mean, I'ma listen, but I will wonder, why do you know this? The female professor is like fondling him under the table, of which he does not seem receptive to. So sexual assault. Julia, overcome and disgusted, decides to excuse herself and go to the bathroom, at which Professor S&M goes to intimidate her.
Did you like watching what I was doing to Emerson under the table? You'd make a very pretty pet.
Does no one care to keep their jobs? What is the disciplinary structure? It must not be great. Maybe that's why they're getting away with it, because everybody's just being gross and sexual assaulty to everybody. Also, can we please stop with the lesbian predator trope? It's very tiresome.
I'm a human being, not a animal.
Human beings are animals, my dear. We have the same need for food, drink, and sex.
I bet her breasts smell like boiled eggs. After escaping the bathroom, Julia sees Gabriel, and he's like, basically, this is why I didn't want you to come to this dinner, because this is what I wanted. Wow. This is why I didn't want you to come to this, because I wanted you to avoid her. She's goading me and I can't react, is his response to the fondling. Nobody wants to keep their job. Also sexual assault. Like, every single person in this movie is terrible. Wow, maybe that is how, indeed, this is related to Twilight. Also, I would like to say, everyone I've ever met from the kink community have been lovely. Except the guy that offered me BDSM on the street of... I never told that story, did I? It's a long story. Don't feel like doing it. It's not that long. I just don't feel like telling the story. Anyway, most of the people I've met from the kink community have been great. From what I've noticed, that a lot of people that I've seen in the kink community tend to be better at the concept of consent. But the way they talk about her being into S&M is really, really weird and funny to me, because they make it sound like she harvests organs for a living. Like, that's the reason why she's terrifying, and not because she seems to be like aggressively sexually assaulting people at any given opportunity. But she takes this S&M thing very seriously. She's like, I can't be with someone who hits, and I can't bear the thought of someone hitting you.
I don't understand why anyone would not choose kindness. Life is painful enough.
Girl, if you don't suck a dick and shut up.
These people seem to think that BDSM is like a precursor to mass murderer or something. Like, Gabriel invites her to a gallery. The bouncer takes her coat, and he fine as oh my god. They make out in the gallery for an incredibly long amount of time. I've edited out a lot of making out. There's just a lot for no reason. It's just so much filler. They come back to his apartment, and while he's like in the bathroom or something, or in some other room, she gets a call, and it's from none other than dun dun dun, her ex-boyfriend Simon, with whom she has a dark past. This movie is irrevocable trash, and I will be watching the third one. I've gone this far down the hole, I want to know where it goes, even though I know it's nothing but a landfill. We're finally returning to the Gabriel's Inferno series. This one's been a whirlwind. Today we're talking about Gabriel's Inferno Part 3. Gabriel's Inferno is the story of Julia Mitchell, who is a master's student, and she's in love with her best friend's brother, who is also her professor, Gabriel. It's a tale as old as time, you know, abusive man who we for some reason think is hot for being abusive, or we're supposed to at least, falling in love with the meek virgin, and it's just the progression of their events leading to an ultimate climax, no pun intended, where they finally have sex. I think it was the last video I did on this when I realized that this is also a Twilight fan fiction turned novel turned movie, which just broke me down because it's like inescapable. Miss Myers done made so many bags off of us. We will never go back to love stories that are in some way Bacon number-esque related to Twilight, and it's just very, very sad. But now we're on to the third movie I generally have a rule of thumb that the third movie or the third season of something, it's probably gonna be the worst out of all of them. Perfect example was last week. Like, I don't love the After series, but the second one was at least entertaining, but the third one just had nothing. And in many ways, this movie is pretty similar. My theory is that by the time you get to the third season of something, what you use to make it special is kind of used up by the end of the second season. So now you're going into like a new arc of events that often we just don't care about. Shout outs to You. I didn't like You season 3. Like, I watched it. Felt very Gossip Girl-esque, ironically, considering Penn Badgley was in Gossip Girl. Would you guys want a video on that? Considering it's been several weeks, probably no one cares anymore. But if you'd like my thoughts on You season 3 or just You in general, let me know, because I've been considering doing a video on that, but I just haven't gotten around to it. So with Gabriel's Inferno, from what I understand, and I'm not going to check on specifics because it's all trash anyway, but the books are set up like Dante's Inferno, and so there's like sections of their relationship. First book is Dante's Inferno, which they have now made into 3 parts, 3 different movies, and now we're on the final movie of that. There's gonna be like 12 movies. I have mixed feelings about that for obvious reasons. I do this for content, but also, damn, 12 of these movies, but I'm gonna watch them. Gabriel's Rapture is coming out at the end of this month, if I'm correct. So I wanted to get this out of the way before that comes out. Being that this movie doesn't really have a whole lot going on, I suspect that this video is gonna be quite short because, spoiler, about a whole third of the movie is one specific scene towards the end, which I can only talk about so much. So without further ado, this is Gabriel's Inferno, part 3. Yay. Okay, so movie begins. They have, again, the exact same intro. They said we're gonna get our money's worth for this one. Old Italian art, lacrimosa, you know, the work. If you recall, at the end of the last movie, basically Julia had gotten a call from her abusive ex, Simon. He was calling about some pictures that he said that she had, and he was gonna come get her. And he says that if she doesn't give him back these random photos, that he's going to show her father a video of her giving him oral sex. Maybe this is me putting hope in patriarchy, but one would think if you sent this to her dad, that would make you the asshole? Like, whatever, that's a lot to process. I'm sorry. What? But anyway, she gets off the phone crying, and here comes Gabriel. He picks up the phone, and he starts to threaten Simon for blackmailing Julia. Now, I do not blame the actor for doing his lines like this, because as I've mentioned before, he does have a pretty thick accent, like a thick Italian accent. I blame the director, and I blame Elon Musk. I forgot to mention this. Apparently PASSIONFLIX is Tuskamus, his sister's company. I will blame Elon Musk for everything. I believe this is a money laundering scheme, but it creates garbage, so how can I stay away? But anyway, no, the director didn't tell him to retake this scene, and if I wasn't watching this with captions, because I watch everything with captions, I wouldn't know what he said. Like,
I'm going to come after you, and not even your father, whoever he is, will be able to make you function again.
Not even your father, whoever he is, will be able to make you sentient again. Is that what I heard? No, that's what I read. So, and then for dramatic effect, for some reason, he throws the phone on the ground. Like, that's her phone. Throw your Julia's really concerned because he filmed this without her consent. And apparently he has the ability to do worse because his dad's a politician. My dad's a lawyer energy, you know? And with all those connections, he could literally ruin her life. Gabriel, who seems like exceedingly aware that he's in a romance novel, is like, he can do nothing to you. I was like, he probably could. I think she has very real reason to be concerned if that were truly the case. So she ends up hiding this encounter because apparently she believes that her father wouldn't believe her. Your dad sucks. Because again, if your ex did this and sent it to your father, he should theoretically understand that that makes him terrible, but okay. In fairness, there are a lot of not dads out there, so. Side note, I don't know why, but I have Shiny Replay stuck in my head, and I don't know why. It came out of nowhere. Replay. Nuna Night MVP. Did I do it right? Another thing that doesn't make sense or I don't understand is who the this guy is. Because Gabriel and Julia walk into his parents' home, his adoptive parents, and without introducing himself, or introducing us more specifically to who he is, no one says who he is. So as far as we see, it's just this random guy in their house.
Professor Emerson, that must be quite the turn on. Do you have all your women call you that too? Must be really hot in the bedroom.
From what I gather, he's like another sibling. But again, this is the third movie, and this is the first we're seeing him.
And the last. This is one of the many plot points they just start and go nowhere with.
So there being another sibling is news to us. And they never really explain who he is. I guess he's their brother. In our first introduction to him, he's just going gun-ho, saying like really rude and sexual things. And we're just like, oh, okay, cool. Like, what? But Gabriel and Julia are hiding this relationship from the rest of their family. The sister knows, but I don't know why. I guess it's, you know, something to spice up this otherwise pretty uneventful story. I mean, the only thing that we have is the abusive ex, which, spoiler, isn't really gonna carry this movie. That conflict specifically doesn't really stick around for the majority of the movie, so I guess we need something. Even if they found out, there's not much to say that they wouldn't be okay with it, you know? I don't know. There's a lot of this movie that I'm not even gonna talk about because most of it is just this like oddly ill-timed, super romantic lovey-dovey stuff. I'm gonna skip a bunch of those scenes because it's literally, it doesn't do anything to push the storyline forward. There's one in the parents' house. The only reason I'm gonna mention that is because of how comically different the sizes of their heads are. That's the only thing I noticed. It looked like Pac-Man. Also, he says explicitly that he would like to have sex with her, which is the first time in this series where he's ever said it so explicitly. The thing is, this is a movie. It's also a movie based off of Twilight. So they're gonna like say that, but not really have sex until it's like a catalyst. Like it is the final act in this movie, figuratively and literally. Being that this is PASSIONFLIX and so much of the movies are based off of just the general horniness of the viewer, this is the only movie I've seen from PASSIONFLIX where the couple has abstained from having sex for 2 movies. They said if we're gonna do that and they're having sex in this third one, we gotta make it an event, you know? So they don't have sex. When they talk about it, they're like, we have to wait until the perfect moment or whatever, which is fine. But it creates this reoccurring theme where they kind of come out of nowhere. I want to have sex with you, but not now. But I would like to have sex with you, but not now. But I want to no real stipulations stopping them from having sex. You know what I mean? Because in Twilight, his whole thing was like, I could literally you to death. Like my dick could break your bones. Or even to some degree, if there was like a religious reason why they're not having sex, there's none of that. It's just them saying no. But I want to, but no, but I want to. It's like, what's stopping you? But because this is a movie, they've decided to make the sex like the final act. Before that, we need some lukewarm drama. She talks about how she wants a future with him, having kids running around, and he basically says to her, I cannot have kids. I had a vasectomy 6 years ago. Yeah, so can't do that. And she's like, okay, well, I love you. We can address this some other time. Later. Simon, the abusive ex-boyfriend, comes over to be the abusive ex-boyfriend, I guess, to get those damn pictures he keeps going on about. And then Gabriel at his parents' house, so a whole other house, as if he has like a sexual assault spider sense, he just for some reason psychically goes to her house right as Simon was about to assault her. In the course of his assault on her, he ends up biting her neck. She's able to get away from him and barricade the door as Gabriel comes over, beats the shit out of him, and threaten him to never talk to her again. I thought that this whole sequence of events would be like the driving force of this movie. I thought he would come back in the final act, or like he would try to do something with all that power he's always talking about in regards to like his father or whatever. But we're 30 minutes into the movie and he's just gone for the rest of it. I don't know if they don't even like suggest that he might be back in the next movie. When I was looking at the trailer, they don't really show that might be a conflict of the next movie. So they just brought it and dropped it. And I'm just like, okay. The only thing that this did is give her a scar that she mentions briefly throughout the rest of the movie as being like something she's working through because that's very traumatic for her. And now it's like this reminder of that. But as far as him as a villain, that's it. It's like they realized, okay, people are really only here for the sex, so we're doing this as like a formality so that this isn't strictly softcore pornography. Even the conflict that sort of comes up after that, which was Gabriel and Julia's father fighting over like how he's not great at protecting his daughter. They start that and drop it as well. Like their animosity towards each other doesn't really go anywhere either. So traumatized from the assault, as you'd imagine, Julia tries to regain her power by seducing Gabriel. And for once, Gabriel realizes, oh, that's pretty f***ed up. I shouldn't do that. So he's like, no, I'm not going to take advantage. You're not really doing this because you want to, you're doing this because you're traumatized. She ends up telling the story of why she never had sex with Simon, which was basically because he was very possessive and abusive and controlling. And then she ended up leaving him after he cheated on her with her roommate. I think there's a line about them saying, why don't you join? And they laughed at her, which I understand if that actually happened in real life would be very traumatizing. However, it just sounded like a porno setup to me. So I just started laughing, and I shouldn't have laughed. I'm sorry about your trauma, girl. But she's currently in this whole pickle with her father because her father is currently dating that roommate's mom. Messy. Ghetto. I'm interested. But they don't really go anywhere with that either. They don't even really talk about that. Like none of the conflicts that they begin in this movie really went anywhere. So we don't really see much with the dad being resolved. We don't see anything with this Simon dude. Speaking of conflicts that they don't really do much with, we get the story behind Gabriel's tattoo. I don't even know if I've even really talked about this. I didn't think it would be important, to be honest with you, but I should have, because they did kind of lean into how it must be kind of important in the first movie, but there was so much going on in the first movie that it was the least important thing to me. He has this hideous tattoo on his chest, and it says the name Maya, M-A-I-A. And she asks him about the tattoo. Because this is a movie, he has to be very cryptic about it, so he describes it. And we, as the audience, and Julia, believes that it might be a woman he was in love with. And he's like, no, it's not like that. She not as nosy as me, I guess, because she don't ask, well, what is it? This whole inquiry into the tattoo sends him into a depression episode. And he ends up finally confessing that the tattoo... He opens this in the worst way possible. He opens it because he knows he's in a movie. That's what I mean. There's so much about this movie that you can tell was only done for dramatic effect, and it's so annoying. He's like, I have something to tell you, and I don't believe you will like me anymore after you learn this. And I was thinking he was gonna say like, oh, I cheated on somebody before.
Gabriel, please.
I'm a murderer. I took an innocent life.
You win this time, movie. He got me. But when he starts to talk about the actual background behind this statement, it's actually even stupider than I thought it would have been. Because the very long story about this is that the tattoo is actually the name of his child that passed away. And I was like, is this gonna be like a whole Stephanie Meyer abortion is bad like diatribe? And it kind of is, honestly. Back when I was a soda machine, I was full of Coke. In the midst of that time in my life, the only thing I cared about were drugs and my dissertation. Multitasker. I met this girl and we were in like a casual sexual relationship, and she ended up getting pregnant, and I wanted her to get an abortion, but she didn't. And she taped the sonogram to my refrigerator or something. And I was like, that's my baby. She has the baby, and they were both very much so in the depths of their addiction. Somehow the baby died. They don't really go into detail on that. My thing is, because I have so many questions, what happened? We don't know if the baby fell. We don't know if the baby was hurt by the mother.
Or Gabriel, for that matter. He did call himself a murderer.
We don't know anything. It was just the baby dead. Because Gabriel was so strung out, he was unconscious, and he couldn't like call the ambulance in time, and the mother couldn't call the ambulance in time. So he takes that on as his personal responsibility for his role in their baby's death. Now, somehow through the course of telling this story, Julia is somehow able to deduce that it all happened the same day as the first day that she kissed him in the orchard or whatever. Really gross moment that's supposedly romantic, but she was definitely underage and he wasn't. Sizably not underage. And anyway, somehow she's able to deduce that happen the same day. I don't know how she was able to do that, but it's a movie, so. And she's like sitting there reminding him of his humanity, and yeah, you know, Twilight. They're just stronger than ever, their relationship now, because of that. They go to Italy for some reason. I don't know why. Presumably because we have to get to this final act where they finally have sex. We've waited now at this point accumulatively over 5 hours watching them do stuff. When are they getting to fucking, is what I presume the audience is thinking. I'm not, because I don't mind sex in movies, but often I find that sex is used instead of like a plot. And this is a perfect example of that. Like if I wanted to see two people have sex for 22 minutes, that's how long they have sex, people. 20. It's kind of impressive, honestly. If I wanted to see that much of two people having sex, I would just watch pornography. Like they do some lecture stuff, go to museums, and they go back to the hotel and they have sex for a very long time on screen. I've seen worse, if we're talking about the quality of the sex scene. I've seen sizably worse, but it's just so damn long. It literally is 22 minutes. It's a fourth of this movie. The only critique I have is that there's a point where Gabriel says to the Virgin that her getting on top of him is the better way to go. No, it's not. It's not at all. Absolutely not. Don't do that. If I had to have sex for the first time, I wouldn't recommend it. That's a lot of gravity. And that's the movie. That's it. I know you're sitting there like, I watched your video, Kendall, and nothing happened. Exactly. 25% of this movie, it's literally just them having sex. And like plot lines they start and don't finish. Usually I do like a whole final thoughts thing, but I don't really know what to say. Nothing happened. Usually the end of the movie is like the final act, the catalyst, the end of like the villain's tyranny or something. They ended the movie with them. They were like, we finally beat her virginity. Like we never figure out really anything. We never figure out anything about those photos that Simon was going on about. Like what were in the photos, what did she have what photos? We never found out anything about the photos. We don't get a nod that he's gonna be back in the next movie.
Also, nothing from the last two movies was really even brought up either, conflict-wise. Like, whatever happened to the BDSM professor girl? What happened to her? She just was around for 3 seconds to be weird and then left.
I feel like they should have called this Gabriel's Inferno. Get to f***ing. And I think that would have really cemented the general purpose of this movie, because that must be all they were really focused on. I feel like, considering we did After We Fell last week, these two movies feel very similar, and maybe that is just another example of my thing that I was talking about before. It's like when you get to the third one, things fall apart. And when you have two things that weren't really that well built together anyway, it's just like a catastrophe. Weirdly, I think this one is even more so a catastrophe because, again, a fourth of the movie is one sex scene. Yeah, wild. I know. Okay. Gabriel's Inferno. Well, specifically Gabriel's Rapture, which is now the fourth movie in the Gabriel Inferno series. PASSIONFLIX has decided to milk it for every part it's worth by turning each book so far into at least 2 movies. The first book, Gabriel's Inferno, had 3 different movies, all of which I've covered. The second book, Gabriel's Rapture, so far has 2 films as of filming this. I don't know if they're gonna do a third one. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I believe in total there's 3 or 4 books. So that means we're gonna have to sit through 9 to 12 movies if they plan to do 3 movies per book. And one of the core issues I have with that is that so little happens so far in these last few movies. Why did we need to split this up in parts? Like nothing's happening. Literally the last movie, a third of it was them f***ing. Gabriel's Inferno is one of the many horrible things that have been birthed from Twilight. So, you know, there's a lot of this sort of anticipation around them having sex for the first time. So I get like it being a big deal considering we've waited 2.5 movies to watch it, but a third of the movie, like, wow. So now we're in Gabriel's Rapture, second book. They've already had sex. And now it's their life as a couple. We are still with Julia Mitchell, who is a master's student studying Dante-focused Italian literature. And her professor, Gabriel Emerson, has a cocaine-riddled sex demon pad past with a baby mama and a mommy dom somewhere in there just sprinkled in for fun. And through all that, he was still able to finish his dissertation. Impressive, truly. Shit, I need to level up. Only thing stopping me from aiming higher is depression. But they are in love and they are together. There's a lot of creepiness in that fact, but I'll let the last 3 videos speak for itself in that regard. Pay a pedal. We're supposed to ignore all of that because, you know, a violin is playing in the background and it's on PASSIONFLIX. So we just have a square-headed, tall man who's dark, brooding, has a salacious past, and speaks as if he memorized passages from Ruby Kaur. Now, though this movie is tackling a bit more than the last movie, again, the last movie, a third of it was them having sex for the first time, this is still pretty draggy. It's like, I want to know what's going to happen because I've already invested 4 movies at this point, so I'm going to finish. When is the other shoe going to drop? I'm bored. Somebody starts snatching wigs. But especially that first half, if not more, of this movie, pacing-wise, is really, really clunky and hard to get through. But I did, and since I did, we're going to talk about it. So without further ado, this is Gabriel's Rapture, because I wanted to say Inferno again. Part 1. I made the foolish assumption that once we got past the first book, so the first 3 movies, that we'd finally get a different opening sequence. But nope, still a Requiem, Lacrimosa playing for their love story. But they did switch up the film aspect a little bit. They wanted, you know, to differentiate in that regard, but largely it's the exact same intro. And we're taking off from Julia and Gabriel having sex from the first time. Again, they're in Italy while he's there for like a lecture or conference, something for work. They're still hiding their relationship as student-teacher because he would get fired. So I find it quite a bad idea, honestly, to take your student on this trip, even if, you know, I just love her so much. Like, it's stupid. But they had just had sex for the first time. For Julia, it was her first time ever. She lost her virginity. And they're on cloud 9. They're like, wow, our relationship is like so strong. I love you. You are my angel. You are my Beatrice. You are my Bella, Bella, Bella. There is some concern about, you know, Gabriel's past in the sense that he still gets contacted by a woman named Paulina. And I was like, who's Paulina? I first thought it was Mommy Dom because she hasn't been back for like 2 movies. I was like, oh, what happened to her? No, we haven't mentioned her since she appeared that one time. This apparently is the mother of Gabriel's deceased child. I think that was the last movie where we found out that he was with this woman and they were together, you know, sexually purely for a while. And they both were in their drug bender type situation. They ended up having a child named Maya. The child ended up dying under circumstances that I don't think we ever really found out. She just passed away. And it sent both of them into, you know, their own respective depressive episodes. Gabriel got a vasectomy afterwards because he doesn't want anyone to have him as a father. Paulina had a breakdown. So yeah, apparently that's Paulina. And she's calling, and that makes, you know, Julia feel uncomfortable because it's like, why is she calling you? You know, she's not a part of your life anymore. Why does she feel that she can contact you, you know? And he kind of says like, well, I'm not going to answer, so it doesn't really matter what she's calling for. Red flag. It's a big giveaway. It's a dead giveaway. Julia decides to ignore it. She says, okay, fine. We're in love, whatever. In Italy, yay, go Italy. But another factor that's also bothering Julia is her PTSD from her abusive ex, Simon, that attacked her in the last movie. Again, if you haven't seen the other videos, you're probably lost, but I'm going to try to like guide you through it. Her abusive ex, Simon, came and found her, tried to blackmail her with photos of her performing oral sex on him, attacked her and bit her, causing her to have a scar on her neck. And throughout this movie, we are kind of following her processing that PTSD component. And throughout this movie, now that she is sexual with Gabriel, it ends up being like a reoccurring thing, her trauma around sex. It shows up in her being very concerned about pleasing Gabriel. She feels very critically about herself sexually. Up until this point, the experience any like little experience she had doing some things, though not penetrative sex, was criticized by Simon. He would mock her. She wants to improve. She's like really concerned about how well she's doing, you know, stuff like that. Working through her traumas in relation to sex and her desire to get assurance and reassurance from Gabriel. I have mixed feelings about this. Like, I do appreciate that it kind of showed it as something that is possible as a result of trauma. But being that Gabriel is gross, as we've established in the other movies, he kind of turns this into like, you know, oh, she just wants to please me. And it's just like, like, no, bitch, she's traumatized. Like, and by the way, of all the gross things that have like bled into this movie from the other one, that is still one of the top that grosses me out the most. There is a lot of reverence around how up until this point she was untouched, which isn't even true. As a side note, can we talk about virginity really quickly? Because I find it very interesting that Julia is still considered a virgin. I feel like maybe this is me stepping over a line here, but I would imagine that this is somewhat, I think how we understand virginity as penetrative sex is homophobic. I've been unpacking that thought a little bit because a friend brought it up to me because she was like, so you're saying that lesbians that have sex for the first time, if there's no penis involved, they didn't have sex? And I was like, I see you. I get it. I don't know where I'm going with that thought, but this idea that, again, one of the tropes that come along in romance in general is that Julia wasn't actualized until she had sex, penetratively, vaginal sex with a man. And virginity is a social construct anyway. I'm a virgin. On the right day. Any man that's had sex with me, no, you haven't. Shit, I don't claim these niggas. I am chaste and pure as newly fallen snow. Amen. Okay, Lord, deliver us. Amen. Okay. Take us to the king. Yes. I don't have much to bring. I got so off track. Oh my God. Anyway, but yeah, he's like really caught up on her chastity. He lets it bleed into his lecture that he ends up giving at this conference, I guess, about Dante or about Italian literature or something, art, whatever. A lecture on basically female archetypes in Italian art, particularly how Venus represents sexual love, but she maintains a vulnerable modesty. Her shyness increases the eroticism of the... It's creepy. I'm sorry. Like, it's not new sentiments. He's been doing this, I think, since the first movie, where he's just like, I'm so happy I'm your first kiss. I'm so happy I'm your first this. I'm so happy you're your first that. And it's just like, like, why are you so turned on that she's clueless? Even if she's not underage, there is a creepiness about that, and I stand by it. There is something about that. But at this event, Julia ends up meeting a man named Giuseppe, who is a professor of Dante literature himself. It's pretty apparent from the jump that he's interested in Julia and asking her would she like a drink, and they start talking. She ends up telling him that she is a Italian literature master's student as well. She studies Dante. He says that he knows some people at the University of Toronto, which is where she goes to school. And he asks if she is a student of Gabriel, which she swiftly remembers would be a bad idea to admit to. And she's like, no. Nah. Giuseppe really presents himself as being someone who, you know, isn't a fan of Gabriel, which, hey, we're in this together then, dude. Giuseppe continues on to essentially say that Gabriel's entire speech was an embarrassment, which, you know, in fairness, just as an audience participant, yeah, it had no structure. It was just him going on about why the Venus is bangable. She's chaste and she's a whore. Best of both worlds, baby. Of course, because this is a romance, we have to have like the dick swinging competitive jealousy things. So here comes Gabriel like, excuse you, why are you talking to my fiance? If I recall correctly, he has not proposed, so they're not actually engaged. He's just saying it to just say like, get away from my girl, but like, get away from my fiance. And this whole like jealous interaction unleashes the dom out of him. So of course he has to do the whole like, let me take you into a different room and claim what's mine. They make out. Why am I trying to talk and do this? And at some point she's like, don't bite me, please don't bite me. And that's again her trauma coming up again. And so he calms down, he chills out. stops them from getting like a public indecency charge. I mean, I'd be into it, but I'm afraid of the law. I'm afraid to catch a charge just because I wanted to get clapped next to a statue of David. Like, one of the things I noticed very quickly about this movie is that there's like a running list of bitchy antagonistic women. You know, Julia is really seen to be the only, or one of the few, I should say, good women in this movie. And every other woman that ever interacted with Gabriel is like a terrible bitchy person. This is blue. All right. I didn't plan for that, but okay. They changed their formula. These used to be dry as a bitch. Which brings up Bitchy Bangs. Bitchy Bangs is what I'm going to call her because I don't know what her actual name is, but she was working alongside with Gabriel in other movies. I don't know how much I've like mentioned her because she's not really that important. She just says like offhanded comments and you can tell that she's attracted to Gabriel. She becomes a bit more important, or I feel like she's going to be more so in the next movie because Giuseppe emails her. Apparently they have some type of relationship. They had a sexual relationship at one point. And he's like, hey, I heard Emerson's speech. It was much to be desired. I also met him and his fiance. Being that Bitchy Bangs works with Gabriel pretty often, news of him having a fiance is news to her. So she's like, he has a fiance? What? And also, again, she's attracted to him. So she's like, jealous, you know. Well, what's her name? And then we spend most of the movie waiting for her to get the email confirmation of who this woman is. And again, must I remind you that if people find out that they're together, he loses his job. So yeah, it was a really great idea to bring your student to like a conference where people who all study your niche things are hanging out together. Great idea. I just don't like sloppy. If you're gonna do it, plan accordingly. Julia asks Gabriel to pay to get her scar removed from the attack, and he agrees because, you know, she's been living with this reminder of her trauma. She wants to get rid of it, and he's like, sure, I'll do that for you. He says in return, he would like to ask a favor of her, and his favor is that she talks to a therapist about all her trauma, about the experiences she's gone through with her ex, with him, with her family. You know, she should be talking to a professional about all of these things. Like, he's a difficult person to be with as well, and he has a difficult past. She encourages him to do the same because, you know, she's really concerned about how jealous and angry he got after he saw her with Giuseppe. They kind of romanticize how they have compatible brokenness or whatever, and it's like, okay, but I'm gonna just take the good over the bad. I appreciate that we're encouraging people to get mental health services after as traumatic of lives both of you had. So pick your battles. They go off to a villa in Umbria, and around this time I'm like, I'm gonna need someone to start snatching some wigs. I'm getting bored. I don't want to just see y'all have sex and have a great time. I've probably skipped some sex scenes at this point. There's no point of even mentioning them. But they go to this villa, and she, again, is very big on proving that she's pleasing to him because, again, she has a lot of trauma around feeling not good enough sexually. She offers to improvise on the flute, and he's like, oh yeah, if you like, if you want to. But again, this act also shows that she does have trauma. She can't quite bring herself to do it. You can tell she gets quite nervous. And he's like, you don't have to do it. Like, first of all, she offered, and I understand that this is her trying to like work through that, but like, you don't have to do it. They take a shower together, wash away their respective traumas, I guess symbolically. It's a very long scene. But at the end of which she's, shocker, still traumatized. Imagine going to somebody with trauma and being like, have you considered bathing? So they finally come back to Toronto. Julia meets up with her father. If you recall, they have a bit of a tumultuous relationship, mainly because he was dating her ex-best friend. This is very ghetto. Her ex-best friend's mom. And the reason why Julia and that girl are no longer friends is because that friend had sex with her abusive ex, Simon. So now she has problems with her father because he was still dating that ex-friend's mother. There you go. Got it? Follow. But during this conversation, we find out that he has broken up with her. because she seems to believe that Simon didn't attack Julia in the last movie. They break up because of that, so that helps to be like a reconciling moment for them. The dad goes off to the bathroom, and here comes the ex-friend, Natalie. Again, another antagonistic woman in Julia's life. And when she comes in to threaten Julia to take back her claims of assault from Simon, because Simon's father is a politician, like a senator or something, and it looks bad to have a son who has criminal allegations going on right now. She's like, take it back, or we're gonna release your revenge photos online, and how embarrassing it would be to see you performing a very normal sexual act. Like they kind of like frame it as if it's just like, not even just like embarrassing in the sense of you violating someone's like life like that, but also in this like, look at you, you're not as innocent. It's like, she gave head, shut up. What if people found out how embarrassing it is that you do a thing that sexually active adults often do? Like, what will people do when they find out that you're 23 and sexually active? You whore. You old scarlet bitch whore. Julia's like, no, bitch, fuck you. I am not gonna take away what I said, because one, he did do those things. And also I have leverage in like the Washington Post to show that he is a terrible person and that he already has a DUI and whatever going back and forth. If you're gonna come in to blackmail somebody, you gotta come, again, sloppy. Bad work. 4D chess it. I'm tired. Y'all don't plan ahead. Y'all don't think bigger. The only reason you're doing this is you're just mad that he chose me over you because you don't even know how to give a blowjob. What is with this movie's obsession with giving good head? You were completely undermined as a woman because you don't know how to give sloppy toppy like I do. Bitch, aim higher. I'm better because I've sacrificed my gag reflex for a man. What have you done? It's like, bitch, I can eat food and not choke to death. I go so hard I don't even have to chew my food anymore. It's like, for a man. Ew, gross. Anyway, Natalie finally gets thrown out of the restaurant. And Julia's left in shambles. Fast forward, and it's Christmas time. Happiest time of the year. And Julia and Gabriel are visiting his family. But when they get there, they see Paulina, my knee jerk is to call her the retired baby mama, but that's really fucked up. And I'm sure, but you know what I mean? I don't know what to call her because she wasn't his ex, right? They never dated. And they used to have a kid together. Baby mama in retirement. I don't know. Anyway, sorry. I'm sorry. Anyway, she's there. Paulina's there. And she's, again, another antagonistic chick in their lives. She kind of walks up to Julia and she's like, who are you? She also says this odd, out of nowhere comment again about giving dome. Again, what is this movie's obsession? You aren't like the most actualized woman until you're amphibious. You don't even have to breathe air. But anyway, she comes to talk to him about some things. They end up having a very, very long conversation away from everybody, so it makes everyone feel uncomfortable and suspicious. When he comes back, he basically has a conversation with his father, who ends up saying you should propose essentially to Julia to prove that you're committed, because up until now it just seems like another person you're having sex with. Now, considering they've only been dating for a very short amount of time, maybe a few weeks, that seems hasty, but it's something that he suggests, and I'm sure that's going to come up soon. He comes back to bed early in the morning, having spent a long time with Paulina, quote unquote, talking, and it makes everyone feel very skeptical and suspicious. And he asserts that, nothing happened. Her popping up was just another desperate attempt at getting back with him, We find out a few more little things about Gabriel and Julia and their relationship. One, that they have differing opinions on religion. She still believes in God, and Gabriel, after the death of his child, doesn't seem to believe that there is this higher being that is merciful if he was able to live that life. And that Julia had such a hard life too, but she exerts that, regardless of what I go through, I believe in God because of the good things in the world or whatever. Another thing we find out is that Gabriel has a foot fetish. Well, a shoe fetish, I guess. Semantics. Here's the thing. This is a side note. This is just Kendall's opinions on foot fetishes. Here you go. Of all fetishes, I find feet to be one that people get really disgusted by, and I don't understand why. Like, I'm not into it. Maybe I'm halfway into it. I like hands. What's the difference? Like, I've heard people into much kookier than feet. I would date a man with a foot fetish, especially if he into rubbing feet. Free pedicures? Why are we knocking this? Why are we shaming this? He probably buy you shoes. Think bigger. Y'all really small-minded, and it shows because that hurt. That was tight on there. They have a gift exchange, and at first we don't know what Gabriel gets, but we find out later that he receives a photo of his deceased daughter from Paulina. This upsets him greatly, and he goes out of the house, kind of storms out, goes for a walk. Julia goes up after him. Julia, being the saint that she is, she's like, she needs help. Oh, I forgot to mention this. Before this, Gabriel's father was insisting that he give the trust that he originally made for Paulina and their child that they had together. He insisted that he gives that to Paulina because she needs help, but that he must insist that she gets like a rehab or something. Here comes Julia being her saintly self, like, she's going through a lot. She's the mother of your child, and Gabriel gets really defensive because she apparently, while they were at the hotel, made a pass at him. This becomes like this unraveling argument about how they actually didn't stop having sex years ago, which is what he suggested prior to this, that they actually only stopped having sex about a year ago, which would definitely change a lot of timelines that he had misrepresented up until this point. So they didn't stop having sex in grad school, which would have been about, give or take 8 to 10 years ago. They very recently relatively stopped having sex. And Julia's like disgusted by that because, they weren't together, but she was more in his life than he led on to believe, right? So after they had the child, after the child had passed, they were still interacting with each other. Julia's like, do you love her? Did you ever love her? He said no, he never loved her. He had an affection for her. He had, to some degree, an addiction to her, but he never loved her, which... Sorry, that was my own dating history, but I had a trauma flashback. I'll just say I've been kind of Julia before, and it's not fun. But she's like, I'm confused. You slept with her for years. You had a baby with her. And you can do all that and not feel anything for her. You just kind of threw her away. You fed her scraps of you. You used her. How am I supposed to believe that you wouldn't do this to me? Again, trauma flashback, sorry. She asks if Paulina ever forgave him. And he kind of just says, Julia, you're the only person I love. This scene was actually shockingly triggering. I'm not gonna go into my dating life, but I've been in situations with a weirdness with an ex, and if you are listening to this video and you feel anything like this, you're like, I don't like how you are with your ex, leave. Run, bitch. Run now. Go. Leave. Pack your shit. Get the out. I'm so happy I don't do story times anymore. Y'all would know too much of my business. She's like, don't lie to me again. And he's like, I'll never lie to you, blah, 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 whatever. And then we finally wrap up the movie. We are back with Bitchy Bangs. And she finally gets that email back from Giuseppe that says that the fiance's name is Julia Mitchell, who is her classmate, which means that a student is sleeping with Mr. Gabriel Emerson. But anyway, that's the end of the movie. This movie, again, drags in the beginning, but we do get picked up. I do want to see what happens in the next movie, Gabriel's Rapture Part 2. It is out already. I want to know if we're ever going to get Mommy Dom back. We are now on the 5th movie of the Gabriel's Inferno franchise, and the second movie of the second book, if I'm not mistaken, of the novels, Gabriel's Rapture. The story revolves around a master's student by the name of Julia Mitchell, who ends up in a romantic relationship with her professor. a Mr. Gabriel Emerson, who of course has a dark past, a brooding personality, and suspected inappropriate urges. Hey, Miss Myers! If you were wondering if it has anything to do with Twilight, of course. If I'm not mistaken, it was also a Twilight fan fiction. She's mousy, quiet, and unassuming, and therefore he has this inexplicable obsession with her. At this point, they are now a couple, but this episode shows that it's not going to be all smooth sailing for these two lovers, ? In this movie, they decide to make certain decisions that I'm truly not surprised by. The author seems to really hate women. I don't think I've ever explicitly said that, but I do get the vibe that she just don't like any women except for like mousy, virginal, naive girls like Julia. But there's gonna be more problems with bitchy, antagonistic women. I'm not gonna go through everything that's happened in the last 4 movies because we'd be here all day. But long story short, a lot of romanticization of this very inappropriate power imbalance. Something that rhymes with brooming is meant to be fine because this is just the beginning of their love story. And that's all before we even get to the ex-baby mama and the cocaine abuse. He has a daughter that passed away. We still don't know how. And I just don't like how we're just gonna act like that's not important. Like, how did the baby die? We don't, because no one ever says there was an accident, anything. Just they were really high and now they have a dead child. And no one asks enough questions about that. Moving right along. We didn't pay attention to anything else terrible he did, so I start now. Because the more important thing is they're in love. But yes, romance and every other woman is terrible. And for some reason, Given Dome is also very like thematically, narratively important as well. I can't explain to you why other than it's like the meter stick of whether or not you're a good person, how a good woman, how good are you on the flute stick. Again, watch the other videos. I can't go into the specifics of those. But anyway, this movie begins again with the same intro. We should just know at this point, this is the 5th movie. They're not going to change the intro. They're not going to change the song. Just expect what you should expect and move along. They make these movies with the budget of a bag of chips. So I don't know why I'm surprised that they didn't think to make a new one for each film. Anyway, we are, of course, are back with Gabriel and Julia. She tells him about the ex-friend that tried to blackmail her. If you don't remember that backstory, in the last movie, she had an ex-friend that was sleeping with her ex who wanted to blackmail her with a video of her giving dome again. And they were going to put that video out if she didn't drop the charges against her ex for assault. She doesn't become really a factor in this movie, and I was just gonna take this out, but I kind of wanted to talk about it just in general as a way to say they introduce so much shit in these movies and never come back to them. This is all they're gonna do. They're gonna like talk it over like, yeah, I was blackmailed, and that's the end of it. And this got me thinking, y'all remember Mommy Dom from like the first movie? The really creepy like professor who just didn't care about keeping her job? I was like, we haven't seen her for like 4 movies. Are they ever going to come back to that? Now, with that said, it's not all bad. They do make some correct decisions, one of which is that they both start going to therapy separately. And I don't know. I get the sense that this movie is almost at the point. It almost sees the problems about certain things and misses the mark every time. Because the therapist essentially says to her, I'm really concerned about all the things I've been concerned about. The weird power dynamic, the way that his personality seems like it would very much so dominate over her, even without that aspect of the power dynamic of them being student teacher, or at least at one point more student teacher. But because this is supposed to be a love story and that is the common denominator, like we're not going to focus on anything else because this is a this is a romance movie. I can't even blame this entirely on PASSIONFLIX. It's like most romance kind of drops the ball. Like I do get a bit cynical, but I do feel like a lot of American media around, especially like younger adult or teenage romance, revolves around flowery abuse. Like, oh, we're just so toxic for each other, but it's exciting. And it's like, y'all do know that being happy is an option, right? But yeah, the therapist is like, yeah, he has so many things that will prove to be difficult. His personality, your social dynamic, his past with addiction. And she's just kind of like, we're in love. And then the cherry on top, that lets you know that if this was a real relationship, this would just blow up right in front of both of their eyes, is that he gets at the starting line of therapy. And he's like, the therapist is like, I'm a little concerned because it seems as though you're not going to meetings for like Narcotics Anonymous and like people to help with drug addiction or people that are currently sober. And he just quits therapy entirely. I was like, that's not a great sign. Not even like you got a new therapist, you and this therapist weren't meshing. You just literally stopped. Okay, cool. So remember Paul? I don't know if you remember Paul because I barely remembered him at one point, but the friend, the nice guy that likes Julia but says that he's willing to be the friend and no pressure. I just enjoy being your friend. We can stay that way or whatever. She ends up seeing him one day while she's out with Gabriel, and Gabriel goes inside of a building. I don't know why she stood outside waiting for him to like just go in the building. It's cold in Canada, but okay, for the scene to take place. She sees Paul and he notices that he hasn't talked to her in a while. He's like, hey, how are you? And he notices the mark on her neck, the bite mark, the one that her abusive ex gave her in one of the other movies. Paul is like, hey, what happened there? Are you all right? He starts to think that it's whatever boyfriend she's currently with, because at one point she was like, oh, I started a new relationship. Hey, is everything okay? Like, is he hurting you? Are you all right? Do you need something? And she's like, no, like, I'm getting it removed. I know it's an ugly scar, but I'm getting it removed. And she doesn't really say much more about that. And he's just basically like, if you ever need me, I'm here for you. Like, don't like suffer by yourself. I will help you. Paul, he's been great this whole time. And assuming he don't switch up on us, he's been great. But no, y'all don't want peace. This is true though. I do feel like most people don't want people that treat them well. I've noticed that. Baby, heal. Please find comfort, find love of oneself, because it's getting very tired. Y'all are 27. But because they're still friends, later they end up meeting up for a cup of coffee, and he tells her about Bitchy Bangs, the girl that used to work with Gabriel that obviously had like a crush on him. Obviously one of the many antagonistic women in this story, so you probably don't know who she is. The one with the bangs. That's why I call her Bitchy Bangs. I'm sure she has a name. Her name is Bitchy Bangs. Anyway, but apparently she's like, why is Julia working with apparently the most decorated thesis advisor on campus? Like, she's jealous of all of these kind of seemingly random accolades and awards, attention that she seems to be getting, and she starts to suggest that it's perhaps because of a relationship that she has with Emerson, Gabriel. And ding ding ding, it's right, because they and I would look at you sideways too if you a professor and now all of a sudden you get a trip to Harvard. She ended up invited to Harvard, by the way. Call her up personally, PhD program. They're like, hey, you have been very much so recommended by this advisor. We want you in Harvard. All you got to do is finish your master's thesis, and which I'm sure you'll do, and you come into Harvard. Man, if I can go to Ivy League by putting out pussy, I see why someone would. Julia, regardless of how book smart she is a dumb bitch. And she's like, I don't know if I can go to Harvard because, like, what about my relationship? What? When I tell y'all shit like this actually makes me like irrationally angry. I mean it. When I see a woman in particular giving up career opportunities, accolades, a bag for a man. Every time I see a woman just throw her W's to the side for a man who may or may not wipe his own ass, it breaks my heart. And this bitch don't even exist. This is a movie. She's like, I don't want to be away from you. I feel like it'll be the end of our relationship. Then you don't have a relationship. If it can't last for you to go like an hour flight away, then y'all wouldn't have lasted regardless. If you got to be sniffing up under his ball sack to exist in a relationship, y'all don't love each other that much. But he's like, no, don't even worry about that. I'm going to take a sabbatical because I want to go with you. Personally, that would annoy me, because we didn't even have a conversation about you coming with me. What if I wanted to be alone? What if I like my alone time and now you're planning on living with me and didn't ask? That would make me mad. But okay, I'm just difficult. Okay. But she's happy, of course. That is until she gets a letter that is essentially a complaint, and she's being asked to come in for a preliminary interview. She tells Gabriel, and she's like, why would why would I have to go in? Like, I didn't plagiarize anything. I didn't do any of the things that would theoretically be on the chopping block. And I don't know why she didn't immediately assume it was their completely inappropriate relationship, but she doesn't. They do eventually put it together after Bitchy Bangs has filed a complaint of sexual harassment against Gabriel. Oh, this is the route we're taking. I think the thing that makes me really frustrated about this being the route we're taking is because Gabriel is textbook someone to abuse power, and they're making it sound like he wouldn't do that because he's the lead in a romance novel. This dude is screaming red flags. Screaming would probably do these things. But here he tells Julia, and she's immediately like, you're not that type of person. Wasn't he making out with you when you were underage? Well, we're in love. Bitch, shut up. You a victim. And you know what they do after that? They She don't even pause. She's like, oh, that's not true. I'm like, wow. Even with a dude I've never had any signs about, I would at least say, ooh, let's spend some time apart, you know, maybe away a bit. No, she's like, oh, I don't believe it. But yeah, they have sex after that. They play a song that seems like it's sung by the chick that sung Bésame mucho, como si fuera esta noche la última vez. It sounds like her voice. Her voice is pretty distinctive. I think it's in Portuguese though. I'm not sure, but I do like this song. And it of course annoys me because whenever you put a halfway decent song in a shitty movie, it's usually when they're having sex. So I have to watch this stupid ass sex scene just to hear the vibes. A little long. The scene was very long because they had to the whole time. As if there's not enough red flags, we have a whole conversation when they're on like vacation. They go to vacation right after this. Nothing on your mind. Just go. Okay. And he kind of says something in passing along the lines of like, I'm so thankful that you saved me, quote unquote, from Bitchy Bangs. And I'm like, pardon? Like, what do you mean? What is there to save you from? You were her advising professor. You are the person in power. Is this you insinuating that you would have had a relationship with her too? I mean, granted, he's currently f***ing a theoretically former student because she's not in his class anymore, but he's been wanting to f*** a student this whole time. I'm sure this wouldn't be outside of his realm of possibility. So it just sounds like you would have considered a relationship with her, which would be along the lines of writing you up for sexual harassment or sexual advances. But Julia's a f***ing idiot, so she doesn't put anything together. And she decides to get a lawyer to go with her into her disciplinary meeting. She tells the story of her and Gabriel to the lawyer, reminds the audience that they met when she was 17. And I guess they just ignore that little blip of information by putting like a montage and like sweet music as if this isn't fucking disturbing. Like, the lawyer kind of says to her, okay, here's the thing. If you and him had a consensual relationship, then you both violated agreements at the school, non-fraternizing agreement, and you'll both be held accountable for that. However, being that he is a man of power in this position, you could very much so be seen as a victim. He grades your papers. He's your advisor. He shouldn't have a relationship with you while he's in such a specific state of power, and that by proxy victimizes you. And if you say that, then he would get in trouble. He would be held accountable because he is a professor. No, it was completely consensual. We are in love. And you know, I know this is supposed to be a romance movie, but this shit broke my heart. I find this movie horrifying. I'm like, wow, so many people have been in her position and she does not understand that this is not good. This is not good. And she's like, no, we're in love. Like, he loves me. And because this is a romance movie, they're not going to undermine the romance, right? They're not going to make him a realistic guy who would be like this, who would be hitting on a bunch of students. They're going to make him like super devoted to her. And that pisses me off because if you meet a guy like Gabriel, he's bad news. Just so that you know that if you ever meet a guy like Gabriel, he's not like a sexy man with a dark past. Best case scenario, he's going to cheat on you. I haven't brought this up, but therapists in this, either these are the worst therapists that have ever existed, or whoever wrote this has never been to therapy, but the therapist that Julia is still seeing basically tells her that Gabriel isn't in therapy anymore, which is definitely a violation of something, because apparently the therapist's husband was Gabriel's therapist. And so that's another thing. Are they supposed to tell each other that? Canada. What are the rules in Canada? I'm pretty sure they're not supposed to do that, though. So they finally go to the disciplinary meeting. And this is where it is officially revealed that Bitchy Bangs has filed a complaint alleging that Julia was Gabriel for academic favors, which I gotta say, the evidence doesn't look very good. Even if you love each other, I haven't seen you write anything this whole movie and now you're going to Harvard. That's all I'm saying. They had what seemed to be a very personal argument in front of students. That was in the second movie. Soon afterwards, she changed advisors from him to the other woman who ends up being this incredibly zealous advisor. She gets huge grants. She seems to be abnormally supported, and now she's going to Harvard. So like, what's going on? Throughout the meeting, lawyers do what lawyers do. No one likes a lawyer until you need one. The lawyer suggests that Julia should file a harassment complaint against Bitchy Bangs, which she reluctantly agrees to, which I find wild. What harassment? What did she do? Like, yeah, she's kind of pissed off, but like, is she lying? Is she wrong? Like, sure, you weren't f***ing him for favors, but you f***ed him and got him. Granted, she also wanted to f*** Gabriel, but that's a moot point right now. Gabriel gets upset, punches a wall, breaks like a knuckle or something. That shit is not normal. That shit is not cute. I've heard of a lot of dudes that do that and then want to talk about how emotional women are. I have all my knuckles, all right? So Gabriel ends up upset that Bitchy Bangs has gone to like the board of the student advisory board or complaints, whatever, to say that he had made advances towards her. And when she turned him down, he failed her thesis proposal and threatened to have her removed from the program. And meanwhile, the man running the investigation on the complaint finds the email that Julia sent Gabriel when they were fighting, I think in the second movie, where she said she didn't want to talk to him anymore. Stop talking to me. You're harassing me. I want another advisor. Gabriel goes to Julia's house and they have sex again. It seems as though he was a little strange though, and come to find out this was his goodbye act, because the next time they meet up for the hearing, he's behaving as if she doesn't exist. In comes Paul, and he's like, damn, really? Apparently he was brought in some way as a witness. I don't really know why. I think he was there and saw kind of the advances that Bitchy Bangs did towards Gabriel, but I don't really know what they put him there for. I guess just to find out that there was something between her and Gabriel. At the meeting, they have like hella evidence that they were dating during the semester, which would have been like the crucial part. Like, did you start dating after the semester ended, or were you guys interacting in a way that was inappropriate during the semester? And like I said, there's a lot of evidence that it's obvious that you guys were doing something amorous. Whether or not it was sexual doesn't matter. You were having a lover's quarrel in front of the entire classroom. You switched advisors. You sent an email of him harassing you. Then you go to Italy with him and introduced to his colleagues. What a f***ing idiot. Why did you bring your student to introduce to his colleagues as his fiance, and you want us to believe that you just started dating right after the semester ended? Like, no. One of the women on the board is like, your relationship is inherently an issue. He has authority over you. He grades your papers. He is your professor. Can we just talk to Julia? And she's like, if you were coerced or intimidated in any way, you have every right to say something about that, and we will not punish you for this. And this whole scene is so uncomfortable because, again, this is a romance movie, right? So I'm supposed to think of this, at least how I understand it, I'm supposed to look at this and kind of think of this board as like hindrances to their love when they're just people with common sense. People that have valid and very, very reasonable concerns. And I'm supposed to be like, F you guys, man, let love prevail. And I'm like, he's abusing you. I don't want it to prevail. And instead of feeling like this joy when she's like, no, it was consensual, like, I love him, I'm so sad when I hear that. I'm like, this is bumming me out. And being that Julia isn't accepting that they have concerns and she's very adamant, she's like, we were in a consensual relationship. Gabriel does the truly noble thing and decides, I'm going to take the fall for her because she won't do it. Martyrs himself. At least that's what they want me to believe, or that's what they want me to feel about it. I admit that we were in a relationship. It's not her fault, I guess, was in the relationship under duress and thereby is not punishable. So he decides to take all the blame and she is devastated. She's like, so what if I want to throw my life away? It's not your choice. I'm like, this is, again, supposed to be romantic. This is so depressing. But long story short, they can't be singing together for obvious reasons. And for all intents and purposes, they break up. Boo-hoo, I'm supposed to be sad. I'm not. She keeps trying to like get in contact with him, but he has kind of left his apartment in shambles. He's nowhere to be found. He sends her an email to stop contacting him and that their relationship is officially over. And Paul is there to give her some support in this time of need. This, I will say, this end of the movie was really weird because they put very dramatic music over just like a compilation of him going home and getting in bed. It's like dun 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 dun. And he's just like laying down. But that's the end of the movie. Terrible as usual. I always think that the bar can't go any lower when it comes to PASSIONFLIX film, especially anything in relations to Gabriel's Inferno, but I am often surprised. I found this movie actually one of the most frustrating because it felt like you're almost at the point. But it's a romance. I'm this far along. You gotta believe in their story. And it's like, I don't want them together. We're back. Now that you're all up to speed, all up to date, let's continue this beautiful love story between our Julianne, Jay, and Gabriel. And we'll start off with Gabriel's Rapture III. Not going to bore you with the intro. Spoiler, they all start the same. Lacrimosa, poor use of a requiem. I'm not going to beat that dead horse. But Gabriel and Julia have broken up and she's still working on her thesis. She's working with her thesis advisor, who is an interesting woman who ends up being somewhat of a confidant for Julia as she continues and goes forth with her studies, particularly as she transitions over to Harvard. It's obviously gotten around campus that there was a bit of a thing going on between Julia and Gabriel, but the advisor's like, I don't like people being in my business, so I'm not going to be in yours. Interesting. But as you go to Harvard and no one's going to know you there, it's important to not give anyone an inkling that you didn't, earn all of your accomplishments and that you got it in some way other than your talents as a student, which Julia insists like she did all of her work herself, which, we didn't see her do any work. So I guess whatever she did was hers. The advisor also says that she owes Gabriel a debt. So this is her repaying him by ignoring this grotesque abuse of power, So off to Harvard she goes with the help of Paul. He helps her find an apartment, helps her move in. He's still obviously in love with her, but again, she's like, we're just friends. And then the old words of my dear friend Kyrie, who hates for me to repeat his own words back to him. If one of y'all don't see y'all as friends, y'all not friends. Consider that. And I talked about how I liked him in the early movies or whatever, but at this point, it's like, it's pretty apparent that you do still like her. She's made it pretty explicit at this point that she's not interested in you in that way. So to continue on with even the inkling or the hope that things may change, it's kind of gross. It is. You should understand that that's it. That's it. She still keeps in contact with Gabriel's sister, though, Rachel, and she tells Julia how he hasn't been taking the breakup very well, which is confusing to Julia because you the one that shut me out. So why wouldn't, what? So she doesn't believe that he actually misses her at all. So he's probably going to go back to his former baby mama, Paulina. Oh, my liner wiped off. Do I care enough to fix it? My liner's all the way over there. So far. I have it so hard. Having to stand up from my comfy place for beauty. It's awful. Egad. And though he isn't sleeping with Paulina, he is having intrusive dreams about sleeping with Paulina. And in the real world, that wouldn't be a good sign. But in this movie, it's just her being the ghost of his poor decisions in the past and the people that he's hurt, I guess. if I know. So to run away from his problems, he decides to go on a eat, pray, love trip to Italy. This is a good chunk of this 2-hour movie, him just walking the streets, helping orphans, feeding the homeless, giving quarters to the homeless and shit, while they play vague modern hymn music. It's just him walking around pensively until ultimately he comes back to Toronto, a new man, somehow. And honestly, it's shit like this that made me give up on this series because, again, this was a good chunk. He didn't say shit for large bouts of time because he was walking in Italy. And that had to be shown. And I was like, oh my God. Like, he don't say real lines for like 15 minutes while he's handing out soup and vague modern Jesus hymn music plays. And it was awful. So back at school, Julia is checked up on by the advisors at her university who is making sure that Gabriel hadn't reached out to her because he's not supposed to. And she kind of chastises them. Like, if I needed to be protected from anybody, I needed to be protected from you guys. And again, much like I said about the last movie, it just bummed me out. It made me really sad. She calls them patronizing, like, you guys don't understand our love and it's your reason we're not together, so... And then she graduates and goes off to Harvard. Gabriel's still having dreams, and eventually the dream that he ends up having is about the dead adopted mother he had, Grace. She pops up and she's like, you are a good person, blah, 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 forgive yourself, blah, blah, blah. And he also has a dream of the ghost of his dead child, who is now like a teenager or something, coming to him and saying, it's okay, I just wanted to meet you. Where I am, there's a lot of love and a lot of light, so don't even trip about how I died. I'm good, it's cool. And that frees him, I guess, to some degree. I will say there's another part of the conversation with Maya, or the ghost or apparition of Maya, whatever, where she asked if he loved her mother, Paulina. And he said yes, in a way. In a way, I still do. All I'm saying is, regardless of what this movie and these books try to tell me, a like this would still be Paulina. That's all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. Spoiler, he doesn't do it in this movie, but rest assured, a like this is still Paulina. All right? Of course my eyes are familiar. They're yours. Ugh. Now as she gets settled in Boston with Paul's help, she's actually staying with him momentarily. I don't know. They don't really clarify that. But he's at her home for a bit. And during this time, he decides to do his final hurrah. I love you, baby. Please pick me over him. He ain't shit. Ugh, I hated it. I hated it, every part of it. Because she was very explicit last time. No. He's like, you don't even have to love me right now, but do you think you could love me later? Stand up. Oy. You're going out bad. You're going out real bad. He's like, choose me. Be with me. And he goes up to her, like, touches her face, and I'm like cringing back, like, stop. And then he kisses her, and I'm like, And as bad as that is, she still says, no. Because no. And low key, not even low key, that's assault. Why the f are you trying to kiss her? Why the f are you trying to kiss somebody that said they don't want you? But she's nice about it. I mean, I don't feel like you have to be. Nice for what? She's like, I care about you, but I want you to find someone that loves you the way you deserve to be loved. Whatever. And he's like, yeah, I won't bring this up again. Eventually, at some other point, Paul ends up telling her that Gabriel had quit his job at the University of Toronto, which for some reason is news. I thought he was getting fired. They were mad at him. They were upset. But okay. And one day she ends up discovering clues in a random book that suggests that he didn't just drop off the face of the earth and dump her off so coldly. He was actually trying to send her like subliminal messages in the random pages of some book that she may or may not have opened, where he's like, by the way, I still love you. I hope that you understand that this is just a play for the administrator so that you don't get in trouble, but I still love you even though our love is forbidden. And so like any other romance movie that seems to make this sound romantic and it's not, he pops up over her house in the middle of the rain. They start crying and shit. And he's like, why do you think I don't love you even though I dumped you and stopped talking to you for several months and didn't come to your graduation and act like you died when I went on my Eat, Pray, Love thing in Italy? Like, what? Why do you think it's over? You ain't read the book? You ain't see the book? and so they have this annoyingly slow-paced, like, Paul was here to pick up the pieces and yada, yada, yada. She's like, you didn't say goodbye and say that we'd be back together. You said goodbye by f***ing me and then leaving. She's like, you probably went off to Paulina, yada, yada, yada. He's like, you don't even have to worry about Paulina. She moved to somewhere and she met somebody. So like, why are you upset? As if that's ever stopped from f***ing. As if people don't cheat every day. But she moved to Minnesota and she happy for us. And what? But eventually, they make up because there's 4 movies. So they make up. She notices he's wearing a ring that has an inscription on the inside. And he's like, this ring has a mate and I was gonna give it to you, but you thought I broke up with you when I broke up with you. But eventually they get back together and he forgives her for not finding his message in a bottle or, getting it via carrier pigeon or some shit. But he's like, just know that I love you and I never stop loving you and yeah. And then the rest of the movie, and honestly the rest of the series, is just a movie adaptation that takes the book too literally. There is no way in hell there should have been 4 more movies. Spoiler, this movie and the next one could have been 1 movie. Because obviously what I've just said to you, that's like the first hour. Like, I've never seen a movie in such a amateurish way not adapt a movie at all. It's like word for word. They sit, they stand, they're walking, they're like word for word. And I haven't read the book, but it's just obvious. Like, this didn't need to be 9 movies. It's got an adaptation, babe. You could have trimmed the fat. But okay. She tells him that Paul confessed to her and that he kissed her, but she's like, don't worry about it because you ruined me for other men when I was 17. Yep. Keep bringing up that fact. That's great. As if it's good. Okay. And he was like 32. He wasn't no damn teenager, I'll tell you that. But yeah, after walking around Italy for a while, he's a new man, a man of God. He's now sober, celibate, and wants to marry her and loves her more than ever before, apparently. I don't know why, but okay. He's like, I want to marry you. And she's like, I can't marry you. I'm still kind of like pissed off that you left. And he's like, yeah, but I don't want to have sex until we get married. So we should get married. He words it slightly better than that, but not much better. Because she's like, wow, you're trying to coerce me into marriage by not having sex. He's like, no, I'm just telling you, I, something, don't want to have sex until marriage. And like, that's fine. He's like, when we broke up, you thought I left after I quote unquote f***ed you. And I want to you legally, I guess, so that you know it's real. So until our trust is restored, of course, it's a Twilight adaptation, so do with that what you will. So until trust is restored, we're no bumping the genitalia. So the rest of the movie is just her wanting to fuck him and him being like, no, I'm a new man now. Rachel gets married. I don't know nor remember her dating anyone, but it doesn't really matter. She gets married. And at the wedding, Gabriel sees Julia holding somebody's baby, one of the guests' baby. And he's like, I saw you with a baby. I want to reverse my vasectomy. We should have a baby. And she's like, that's a bit premature, yeah? Anyway, before the movie's over, they end up having sex. It honestly, his whole I'm not having sex thing lasted maybe 20 minutes on film. No sexual tension if that's what they were going for, and the length, and like, I want to, but I can't. Oh, I know. Oh. At least Twilight was very consistent with that. It just felt stupid. But they end up and he proposes to her with a ring box in the shape of a golden apple reminiscent of the apple orchard that they made out in for the first time when she was a minor. Minor semantics. I was like, but romantic, back to where our love began. And he confesses his love to her. He goes on and on about, I want to be the first to ever propose to you and the last and the Paul doesn't come to the wedding, saying that his father actually suffered a heart attack and he won't be able to attend, but that he still wants her to look inward and see if Gabriel's really the man for her. But eventually they get married in Italy in a hideous dress. No excuse. Beautiful building, because, Italy's full of gorgeous architecture. But the dress, ugly. Hideous dress. And afterwards he buys the house that had the orchard, the house that he grew up in. And then they for 12 minutes, and that's the movie. So now you see why I didn't rush to make a video on that. Gabriel's Redemption 1. So Gabriel Redemption, much like Inferno and Rapture, was also a 3-parter. Gabriel's Redemption starts with them in the orchard, and he's like, I want to have a baby. And she's like, no, we've only been married for 6 months and I want to finish my PhD. And he's like, sure, but I'm going to go to the doctor and reverse my vasectomy. And though at the end of that conversation, they seem to be on the same page about that, it doesn't stop her from having a nightmare that she'll get pregnant, have a baby, and not be able to finish her PhD. She ends up writing, I guess, her dissertation or something, and she has Gabriel look over it. And though he says that he would not encroach on her work, he immediately says, your interpretation is naive and stupid and dumb and bad. You're gonna make a fool out of yourself in front of all of your peers and superiors, and ultimately you're my wife and you're directly disagreeing with my interpretation of this publicly. That's gonna make me look bad. I don't want to look bad. So they fight about that. And for some reason, despite him being overbearing in every other context of their lives, she is shocked that he's overbearing in this as well. So they quickly make up after that, by the way. And this is the first of a reoccurring theme throughout the next few movies, is that they have fights and they make up very quickly. Which, sure, like, couples bicker about stuff. And if it's to last at all, you gotta make up. But my God, I don't give a about watching people argue over dumb shit, nitpick over dumb shit, and that's the entire story, if you get me. Like, most of the movie is, this thing happens, 5 minutes later we make up. This thing happens, 5 minutes later we make up. This thing happened, 5 minutes later we make up. Sex is in there somewhere, the end. Sex is there several places. Usually making up is sex. No conversation about what was had. No conversation of the original issues at hand. We just and call it a day. Bad. Please talk about your problems with your partners. And if you don't feel like you can talk about your problems with your partners, that is the issue. That is a problem. Either you go to therapy, they go to therapy, y'all both go to therapy. Somebody needs to get to talking, bitch, because it's sounds rough. I don't know how to y'all do it, and y'all don't know how to talk to people. Jesus. But yeah, it's just a speed run of them arguing, making up, having sex, or talking about having sex, wondering if a place is sex compatible. Like, if you could there, is it too small? Will people hear us? Like, it's so dumb. And it's not sexy. I've never seen people talk so much about and it not be enjoyable to witness. It's awful. Anyway, eventually she ends up at that conference that he was saying, you're going to embarrass me in front of, and then they make up or whatever. And that is where she runs into Bitchy Bangs. Remember Bitchy Bangs? She's there with the Italian professor that was hitting on Julia in, not the last movie, the movie before that. Okay. Bitchy Bangs is his guest. Right? So it doesn't look good when she, gets a bit combative, next to the coffee maker or some shit in the lobby of the graduate seminar or the PhD seminar or whatever. So she goes up to Gabriel and Julia, starts talking about the shit that came out after he quit the job, that they were and that yada yada yada, and that's probably why she seems to be getting so many favors, yada yada. She also brings up Mommy Dom. Y'all remember Mommy Dom and how we ain't seen her ass since the first movie? We won't see her. I've asked all 9 movies. Does that bitch come back? No, but they do mention her, and they say apparently he was also fucking her ass too, and that came out somehow. I don't know, but yes, ultimately it boils down to she probably was fucking for special favors to get into Harvard. This starts an argument, and Gabriel wants to verbally go at it, and Julia's like, no, don't embarrass me. No, this is my thing. Blah 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 blah. It all ends up getting broken up by Julia's advisor, the old lady, and then afterwards, Julia's mad at Gabriel because she was like, I told you don't start shit, and you started shit anyway. I didn't need you to champion for me. But then they make up 5 minutes afterwards. It doesn't matter. Later, the advisor ends up telling the story about why she is indebted to Gabriel. Basically, he had taken over some of her workload when she had to take several months off of work because she went to go visit another professor that was in hospice. Come to find out, she was actually having an affair with this other professor who was married. She was also a student at the time, but no one ever find out. But because she was able to spend that time with him when he was dying, she's, forever indebted to Gabriel. So yeah, I guess I see why she has a weird soft spot in her heart for this very gross situation. Okay. I guess they consider it more legitimate because they're married now. Not just the advisor, but people in general are like, well, if you married her, I guess it was real. So? Anyway, back to Bitchy Bangs. She is fucking the Italian professor poorly, and they show us, and it looks awful. But apparently he is also married, but the advisor lady ends up telling him, keep Bitchy Bangs in line, because if not, we looking at you crazy because you invited her. She's your guest. So chill the fuck out. So he's like, don't embarrass me. Nah. But she can't focus on that because she's honestly there for revenge. She's focused. She's there to start some mess. And so despite him, very overtly and abusively warning her, don't make a fool out of me, she's like, I'm going to do exactly that. I'm going to make a fool out of you. Her plan is to go up to Gabriel and proposition the pussy. Otherwise, she will tell everybody that he harassed her. Now, if you recall, he has not done that, even though if this were a real case scenario, he probably would have, but I digress. This is a movie. He has not done that. But she's like, if you don't f me, I'm going to tell everyone you f***ed me. Why is everyone a fucking predator in this movie? Like every single person, it feels like. Jesus. So Gabriel declines. Well, she kind of walks away as he just stands there confused, like, what the f? I'm not gonna do that. Paul ends up there as well, and he asks Julia to lunch as friends, and Gabriel gets all piss on leg about that. But she's like, no, I want to go. He's my friend. And then later we meet some girl named Allison. Was she in the other movies? I do not recall. I do not remember. I don't think so. But her name is Allison, and apparently Paul and Allison have had a thing going on for a second there, but he was not over Julia, so he kind of broke it off, and now they're just friends. But she obviously really likes him. And again, if one person ain't friends, then y'all not friends. But he ultimately says to her, like, no, you deserve somebody that loves you fully. Kind of like what Julia said to him. Okay, so it's the day of the conference where Julia is going to present her presentation. And prior to that, Bitchy Bangs goes up to her and says, yo, husband is probably going to cheat on you. And he probably already is cheating on you because he deserves a girl who knows how to give a blowjob. He has a ravenous appetite, a ravenous sexual appetite. How do you know? They ain't never, as far as I remember, did they ever have sex? Again, if this is real life, they probably would have, but they've never had sex. But she's like, he has a reputation for his large sexual appetite. Again, if he wasn't in other students like he would be in real life if he was this type of person, then she would have no idea what his sexual appetite is like, bitch. Anyway, she's like, you mousy Christian Catholic girl or whatever. I'm sure you can't do nothing with that. And I'm like, you don't know nothing about her. What do you know about her pussy, bitch? You checking her mileage? Like, what, you checking her oil, bitch? Eventually, Julia does this dumbass speech that, in this movie shuts her down. And she's like, I give him love, something that you can't give him. And I also f him a lot. So, and then walks away. Julia goes to lunch with Paul and she asks if he's seeing anyone, which he immediately diverts from. And it turns into her relationship with Gabriel and how she kind of wishes she could go out with him and the other doctorate students, but he doesn't want to go out casually with students. Suddenly. Okay. She also brings up how he wants to have a child and how that is very nerve-wracking for her because she wants to finish her PhD. And he's like, well, you got to make the decision that's best for you. If you don't want to have a kid right now, don't have a kid right now. Otherwise, you're going to be absolutely miserable. And she's like, having a kid with my husband is not miserable. Bitch! You just said, oh! And again, I have talked about this a lot. Women, stop giving up shit for men that, one, they wouldn't give up for you. Let's start there. He not giving up no career for you. He got his career, and he shouldn't feel comfortable you having to put aside your dreams and shit to have his big head baby. Stop giving up shit that makes you a full and developed and actualized person for a shit. Damn. It's hard withholding something from him when I know it would make him happy. Oh, it's not a something, it's a child. That is a big undertaking. Its head comes out of you. Anyway, she presents her paper. I don't care. It's a bunch of esoterica about Dante and Italian something, yada, yada. But the only thing you need to know is that Bitchy Bangs stands up and she's like, your paper is dumb because blah, 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 blah. She does say something that makes me laugh. She's like, your paper is dumb. It can't be half and half like cream. This is me nitpicking. But is she saying that half and half is cream? Because if she is, half and half is literally denoting how it is not cream. It is half and half. It is cream and whole milk. Can't be half and half like cream. She thought she was spitting, bitch. Or is she saying that cream isn't half and half? This is dumb. Anyway, she rips into her in all the ways that she's dumb and wrong. And then Julia comes back with all, again, the esoterica, how she's not dumb and not wrong. She's actually quite smart and quite right. Basically, Julia wins the argument. And then Italian professor is mad because Bitchy Bangs made a scene like he explicitly said, don't do, cause you're my guest or whatever. Calm your titties, bitch. But Julia wins. She looks good to her peers. Okay. Paul reluctantly asks Gabriel to be his external reader for his dissertation. I guess just because he's so great at it. And he also, in the same conversation, says how you don't deserve your bitch. And then, this is not funny. He says, you don't deserve her. And he throws his cup of water like, you don't think I know that? Oh, that shit was funny. That shit was funny. I'm sorry. And then Paul goes on about like, oh, I thought I met this really great, nice Catholic girl, which explains a lot. I think this is the first time they ever explicitly called her Catholic. And I was like, oh, well, because Twilight has all those Mormon undertones because Stephanie Meyer is Mormon. So I think whoever like adopted or adapted the Twilight fundamentals, maybe they were Catholic this time. I don't know. But it does explain a lot of the shit about purity and the pedophilia and the abuse of power and pedophilia. But at the end of this conversation, Paul is like resolute. I have to end my friendship with her because obviously, again, if one of y'all aren't friends, you both aren't. And he's like, I need to move on and I know this will hurt her. And Gabriel like asks him to reconsider because it will hurt her. He's like, no, I need to do this, yada yada. But they do end up apologizing to each other. Gabriel apologizes to him and again agrees to be his external reader. So yay. Bitchy Bangs waits for Gabriel to come to her door, only for it to be the Italian professor. And he comes to attack her and essay her, which was abrupt and disturbing, but okay. And he falls asleep and she sneaks out of the hotel. And the movie ends with her going to the Columbia offices because she's at Columbia, if I remember correctly. And the Italian professor is trying to move to Columbia as a professor. But she goes to the complaint office or whatever there and says that she wants to file a complaint against the Italian professor. So that's the end of that movie. Gabriel's Redemption 2. Now, at some point in one of the last two movies, I forget, because again, I skip a lot of stuff because it doesn't feel like it matters in the moment, but apparently it does. I forgot to mention that Julia's dad has started dating a new woman, a black woman, and they are very much so in love and they're getting married and she's pregnant. This combined with, you know, all the conversations they've been having about possibly having children brings up a lot of Gabriel and Julia's traumas in relation to their own parents. If you recall, Gabriel was adopted, so there's some turmoil with his birth parents, and Julia's mother was an alcoholic. So trauma all about. Gabriel's birth parents, his mother was an Italian woman, the secretary of his father. And his family, the father's family, was actually in the US. And he was married and he had 3 daughters already. And when he died, when the father died, that's when they found out about Gabriel and didn't want him to be involved at all in the inheritance process because in their mind, who are you? Like, who is this? It was a bit of push and pull, but eventually he did end up getting the money that was due him, his inheritance, but he had never met his half sisters or his father's wife. We'll find out later that the wife had no interest in letting the daughters meet Gabriel. So that's kind of where that ended. He got his inheritance and they shooed him off, right? But Julia's like, if we're even considering having kids, we should learn more about our family history, health, and all that shit. So do that. We should do that. A lot of them arguing about petty shit and then making up, having sex. I start fast forwarding through the sex stuff, by the way. And I think if I recall correctly, back when I was watching it the first go round, the first 4 or 5 movies, I did the same thing because it's just like, it's padding. And if they ended up saying something important mid-coitus, I missed it. I'm sorry, I doubt it, but I'm trying to get done here. I'm trying to close this chapter, baby. Julia's dad updates about the baby that they're having. The baby has a heart defect where he's literally missing half of his heart. So they'll have to do surgery when he's born. And it's really scary. and they're really nervous about it, but you know, they're keeping focused and trying to have the baby as healthfully as possible. Also, Gabriel starts having nightmares about his parents, and this is causing him so much strife that he considers breaking his sobriety, but doesn't. But he does start smoking cigarettes though, because that's better. One night, Julia finds him smoking and she gets upset because she feels like he's doing this instead of breaking his sobriety, and she has nervousness around him drinking because her mother was an alcoholic. This leads to conversations about her health that we didn't know about and never came up before. She has low iron and low blood pressure. The latter she inherited from her mother. This does not come up again. It's just one of the many things that they go back and forth. Their shared anxieties about what are possible things that could inflict our child. He asks about how her mom died, and the fact that y'all are married and you didn't know this is strange to me, but okay. Well, she died drunk, falling down a flight of stairs and broke her neck. And she's like, I'm upset at you for prying, and I'm upset that my unborn sibling might be dying, so f me so that I forget. Which is crazy. Which is insane. Oh. They fight again in the morning because he went out for a jog without telling her. And she's like, I thought that us f***ing last night would help solve your problems, but I guess not. Cause the pussy is therapy. Hey, stop having relationships where all y'all can do is have sex. Like, y'all can't open your mouths for anything other than fellatio. Can y'all talk? Are y'all emotionally competent? Are you emotionally mature? Can y'all articulate your thoughts, fears, and desires? And also do that in sex. They go to an orphanage and volunteer, and after seeing one of the kids for like 38 seconds, Gabriel's like, let's adopt Mia, or one of the kids, Maria, or whatever, don't matter. And she's like, no. What part of I need to finish my PhD don't you understand? She gives very valid reasons as for why adding a toddler onto her dissertation and her just course load undertaking would be exorbitantly difficult. And he's like, you're just letting your anxiety get in the way of your achievements at school. I felt that way too. Don't let it. Bitch, if she felt that way anyway, why would adding a toddler to that problem help? Why would that help? It's not going on a trip. It's not fitting in something into your schedule. It is a child. It's a I hate y'all. And then he has the nerve to get upset at her. The Julia I know is so self-sacrificing that she would give the shirt off her back for anybody. But how dare her care about her education? And she's like, one, that's wild to do that anyway, again, while I'm doing a PhD. But two, also consider these children that they're talking about were children in Italy. They had helped an orphanage in Italy. I didn't clarify that. So that child who does not speak English, you want to uproot her, bring her to the United States where she doesn't speak the language, disorient her completely, and then I not have the ability to fully devote to her because I'm trying to do this thing that I already told you I was going to be trying to do. So you don't give a f about her either. And he's like, well, I'll take care of her. I'll take a sabbatical. But after this argument, they apologize. Blah, blah, blah. We return to the evil ex Simon. Do you remember him? I forgot all about him. Okay, so he is still f***ing the redhead girl. Natalie, I think her name is. Redhead. If you recall, she works for his father's campaign. I think he's running for governor or senate or something like that. And they've been f***ing for a while. And, you know, she has feelings and he's a terrible person. So whatever. Apparently, they're a lot more casual now because he can't be tied to anybody because he's going to go on a date with one of his father's donor's daughters. And he ends up telling Natalie this, like, I'm going, it's just for show. She's a Christian virgin. I ain't gonna get no you ain't gotta worry about it. While he says this, of course, because he's the evil, like, abusive guy, even though everyone's kind of evil, abusive guy, but he's the cartoonishly so. You know, he goes up to her, grabs her face, says, I'm so happy I bought these big old titties, these big fake tits that I bought you, and this chunky, this fat ass. Cause I'm a man. I'm a big misogynistic manly man. And she's like, okay, while you go on a date, let me give you a blowjobs. You remember that I'm a human being too. What is with this series and sex? Oh God, it's so oddly childish. Yeah? It's like a weird, unsophisticated, very 2D understanding of romance and sex. It feels like someone 16 wrote it and it's a mess. Jesus. Anyway, Gabriel decides to donate some of his Dante original paintings to an Italian gallery, and they go to Italy to be there when they introduce it. That is where they run into the Italian professor and his wife. I just realized, did they ever do anything with this? Because in the art room, I forgot about this. There's this like very vampire-esque blonde dude who's like looking at Julia really hard as they're introducing these paintings. He comes up to him very awkwardly and really stiff-legged, like he has to pee, and says something along the lines of like, it's so fortunate that you were able to get these paintings in secret instead of in the open market. And I thought this was going to be a bigger thing. I don't think this guy pops up again the rest of the movie, any of the movies. I don't know who this man is, but he's really creepy. So I thought it would be important, but he just never came back. I don't know. Not gonna worry about that. They end up f***ing in the museum somewhere. The Italian professor goes up to Julia and tries to apologize for the stuff that he's done in the past, and also tries to convince her to put in a good word for him at Columbia. Who's at Columbia? She's not at Columbia. She's at Harvard. Is Gabriel at Columbia? Why didn't he? Well, I guess that's why he didn't ask Gabriel, because he don't like you. He will punch you in the face. Oh, her advisor is at Columbia, I think, right now. She moved to Columbia. Is that who it is? Whatever. I lost track. Semantics. Minutia. But he says to her, you should do it because I stopped bitchy bangs from f***ing your husband. Okay. By assaulting her? That makes about as much sense as any other like awful, evil, and confusing villain shit that someone's done in these movies anyway, but sure. But she gets mad and she's like, you're lying on my husband. And she's like, get the f*** out of this gallery. Later, Paulina sends Gabriel a letter saying that she's getting married, and then we have a flashback to when they, you know, hash things out when he was on his Eat, Pray, Love thing and apologizing to people. She doesn't accept it immediately, but there's a lot of resentment there, but they're able to bury the hatchet. Apparently she can't have kids now, something that went on with the first pregnancy. I don't know. But she does say, you know, she's happy now, she's met someone, and now in the present, that's the person she's about to marry. So good for her. And he already has kids and doesn't want anymore, so that works out. In the present, he's going back and forth about whether or not he does want to reverse his vasectomy now, because he's like, what if my genetics is how Paulina got infertile? Maybe it's my fault somehow. I don't know. And Julia's like, no, it's fine. We can try in the future. I want us to try to have a biological child. And they're both open to adoption or whatever as well, but you know, but he's like, no, I don't want my spawn to devastate you. Twilight. Whatever. But again, they take another shower like they did in one of the other movies to get rid of his trauma, because that's all you got to do is take a shower, babe. You stank. Have you considered that's the reason why you're traumatized? It's the smell reminding you. Back to evil ex Simon. So the Christian girl that wasn't going to give out pussy, she gives out pussy while wearing a rosary. Later, he comes to her home with red roses and she's like, oh, you gave me white before? And he was like, yeah, that's for virgin. She's upset and she's like, that's up because like I didn't have sex before you and now like you're treating me like I gave it up to you on prom night and yada yada yada. Oh girl. But anyway, she's offended, but he wins her over pretty quickly though, and he's like, I like you, and then she's like, oh okay. Or stupid girl, so naive. So young, so trusting. Julia processes her mother's death because she finds some stuff with her father that's like her items that are left over. She has a whole moment where she's like, why didn't my mom love me? And Gabriel for once said something rational, which was like, she was an alcoholic. I highly doubt it's an issue with her love for you. She had an illness, which was her addiction to alcohol. I'm sure she tried to stop, which yes, most likely. Okay, so he gets the reversal for his vasectomy, and the doctor tells him that there's a only 30% chance that he'll end up having kids, like his sperm will be viable. So after he has it, he won't even be producing viable sperm, even if he does, for like a few months. And then they find out that she has fibroids on her uterus, which could get bigger if she were to get pregnant. So there's things to consider in that realm. This movie is almost done, and this is how they end the movie, as usual, on some bullshit. Remember how a few movies ago Simon was trying to show around pictures and video of Julia giving oral sex? He was trying to revenge porn her, right? Apparently Gabriel had found some guy to blackmail Simon into handing over all of that, because apparently Simon was messing around with one of the interns on his father's campaign who was ding 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 17. I love how Gabriel somehow forgets. He's like, oh my God, that's terrible. I'm like, aha. Oh, okay. Yes. It is terrible, ain't it? But okay. But that stops that from going around. And the movie ends with Gabriel's half-sister reaching out to him, saying that she would like to talk to him a bit because it had gotten around that he was looking into his family history. And that's that movie. Last, and definitely least, I am done with this shit. I am ready to go to bed. Gabriel's Redemption 3. First of all, I would just like to say, this is already my favorite movie I've talked about today because it is the only movie that is an hour and a half. Why any of the other movies were longer than that is truly beyond me. I don't know whose brilliant idea it was to stretch out these fucking movies to 2 hours. 2 hours, 15 minutes. You know, that shit. It was unnecessary. It was unnecessary to go anywhere over 1 hour and 35 minutes, including credits. There was no reason this shit should have been over an hour and 32 minutes. Like, I'm so serious. But anyway, ironically, it being the shortest film that they've done, honestly, y'all could have spaced this out better because there was a lot of shit going on in this movie that's very, like, all over the place. And it was very scrambling. Obviously, they were trying to finish things and tidy it up. But if you would have made the other movies have more going on instead of just, like, them and arguing about the same shit over and over again, we could have maybe filled in some of those gaps, but instead we had to watch them have subpar sex. Awesome. Thanks. Anyway, Gabriel meets up with his sister and she gives the full story of their father. He was an imperfect man, the secretary thing. She says there was a period in her childhood where her parents separated, and we assume that during that separation, it was probably when she found out about Gabriel's birth or her being pregnant with Gabriel. They would later reconcile, and after the father dies, it was her mother that kept them away from each other. And she's like, though my father was a cheater and, you know, he was not a perfect person, he wasn't cruel. I believe that he loved you and your mother, and well, girl, it sounds pretty cruel to me. What do you think is cruel then? He had a baby on his wife and then abandoned the baby that he had on his wife. Like, he wasn't nice to nobody. Anyway, I say all that to say she has a complicated memory of him and she's kind of made peace with it. But she's like, I'm happy to teach you or tell you anything you want to know about him or about this side of the family in general. So remember the Christian girl that Simon wasn't gonna but then so he's engaged to her now. And it gets circulated through the paper, and Redhead Girl finds out about it, and she is not happy. She's so upset that she throws up out of pure frustration. At first, I thought she was pregnant. I don't think so, but she's very upset about it, and she takes the flash drive that had those videos of him and Julia, and apparently him and the 17-year-old girl or whatever, pictures or videos or whatever. Apparently, she has her own copy, and she takes it to bring it to the press. But that sleuth guy that Gabriel knew just happened to be outside her house right when she was about to go do that, and he stops her from doing it. Okay, I guess Gabriel is working at Columbia now because he goes up to that one professor that Bitch Bangs went up to tell about the Italian professor about how he was inappropriate with her, right? But this head of the department lady talks with Gabriel about her, about Bitchy Bangs, and she's like, she's a troublemaker. Her work is subpar, and she think everybody assaulted her. This is not a good look. This is not a good look. Because apparently now she's saying the Italian dude attacked her. What? But then the lady doesn't even refute that. She's like, well, he has a history of betting his students, so I don't really need that around my department. Then why are you calling her a troublemaker? Like, she is a troublemaker because this is a movie. But if this was real life, she'd have every right to do most of the things that she's done other than like proposition him for sex and, you know, that thing. But like, as far as saying like, hey, my professor is f***ing a student. Hey, she's going to Harvard. It makes me a little uncomfortable. Is there something going on there? Hey, I just got sexually assaulted by my professor. She has a lot of things to be upset about, but okay. But she's a troublemaker and a liability to the department. But basically, she's not a good look for the school. And later in the movie, they straight up kick her out. They said no other professors want to read your shit and you've been doing terrible work, so you're kicked out. Which I know they're doing that because she's the villain, one of the villains of the movie. But like, again, outside of that propositioning sex to Gabriel and like trying to blackmail him with sex, if this were real life, she'd have every reason to be upset about a lot of things going on at the school. This is gross. It's fucking disgusting. Okay. Redhead, before she could get to the Washington Post, that guy intercepts her and deletes everything that has Julia in it. But he's like, if y'all want to tell the world that this motherfucker was fucking a 17-year-old who was working for his father's campaign, you know, you can do that. And she's like, no, I don't want to be involved with anything Simon related at all. I'm not here for vengeance or whatever. And I'm like, is it vengeance? I think it's just letting people know that he was fucking a 17-year-old. Like, he was a fucking minor. Is that vengeance? I think it's a pretty, you know, admirable thing to do. I think letting people know that is probably good. But okay. Julia's sibling, so her dad and stepmom now, they have the baby. The procedure goes fine. Yay. And right around this time is when Julia realizes that she accidentally didn't take her birth control for a month. A lot going on. And considering this is after his reversal, she's like, oh, thank God, because like the first few months after the reversal, we're not going to get pregnant because he doesn't have any living sperm, most likely. And there's only a 30% chance that we would get pregnant, even if he had all of the sperm that he can have. So it's fine. Well, funny story about how apparently Gabriel is a modern medical marvel because he has hella viable sperm very quickly after the procedure. Soon we will find, shocker, Julia's pregnant. Redhead gets fired from Simon's father's campaign, most likely because Simon don't want her there now, considering he's, you know, he's engaged. Again, like I told you before, Bitchy Bang gets kicked out of her program, which is wild, but okay. And it's very funny because she's like, you can't just kick me out of school without a warning or a reason or any, you can't just kick me out of the program, which she is correct. You cannot do. But she's like, don't nobody like you. Don't nobody want you here. Goodbye. That's how it works in movie world, I guess. Okay. Julia finds out officially that she is indeed pregnant. And for some reason, the OBGYN is like, he can't eat coochie. That sounds fake. That's not real. That ain't real. I heard you can't have sushi. Be careful with the caffeine consumption because it might agitate the baby. Don't drink alcohol. But ain't nobody said you can't get eaten like a forbidden fruit. All right. Like, this is an act between husband and wife, the way God intended. There's no way in hell. Like, if you can have vaginal sex during pregnancy, why couldn't you eat coochie? And I looked it up. Apparently, the only reason you shouldn't be is why you shouldn't be having sex at any point is if you have a sexually transmitted disease that's untreated. So if you have like a cold sore and going to give head, you shouldn't do it whenever. It doesn't matter if you're pregnant or not. You shouldn't be giving head while you have a cold sore. Anyway, back in Toronto, she ends up telling everyone that she's pregnant, and Rachel, the friend, is happy for her but conflicted because she's actually been having some fertility issues, but her and her husband are like, we'll figure something out, and that's their story. Yay. Redhead, in order to get her revenge, ends up sending the pictures. I don't know how she had a copy of them, but whatever. She still had the pictures of him and the 17-year-old, and she sends them to his new fiance, the Christian girl, and she breaks up with him. And Simon's really upset because the Christian girl was different. The Christian girl was different. She could have saved me from myself. And the dad is pissed for obvious reasons because this does not look good on his campaign, I'd imagine. Like, oh my God, my son's a pedophile. Like, oh God. He does go baby pleasing at her house, but the police see him outside and just drive by, like, get off of her doorstep, and he leaves, never to be seen again. Paul is suddenly ready to be with that one girl that he said he wasn't ready for. They just kept having conversations through the course of all the movies. I just skipped the scenes where he's just like, nope, still not ready. But just one day, I guess he's ready, and they end up together because the series is about to end. So yeah. Julia goes into labor and they have to do an emergency C-section, and in the process, they end up nicking one of her fibroids and she starts bleeding a lot. And it's really scary. She survives, and so does the kid. They have a daughter. I don't remember what her name is, the daughter, but I do remember this was one thing I will give this movie. This was actually very cute. They ended up giving the baby a nickname, Spring Roll, because that's all she craved during her pregnancy. And I think that's adorable. Like, your kid being named after the food that you had a craving for while pregnant is actually very funny. And yeah, that's basically the movies. That is it, by the way. That is the entirety of the Gabriel's Inferno, Rapture, Redemption series. Let's close this book and never discuss this again. I haven't actually ventured on to PASSIONFLIX in months, maybe like a hot year or two, because I just was so frustrated with this unclosed saga. So now that we've closed this chapter, I would like to venture back because I've seen that they've been releasing some new stuff. I saw another black one. Curious. They didn't handle the first one very well. What was it? The Brotherhood, something. It was terrible, but I was waiting for the sequel. Maybe this is a sequel. I don't know. But it's done. I'm done. Hallelujah. We're done. So if you like this video, feel free to like this video. Follow me on all my social media, Instagram and Twitter, both of which are KennieJD. Feel free to look at any other terrible movie reviews I've done. Those are the Bat Movies in a Beat playlist. Even if I'm not doing my makeup, because I don't do my makeup much on camera ever these days, because logistically it was a nightmare, but any movie review will still be in the Bad Movies and Beat playlist if it's terrible, Good Movies and Glam playlist if it's good. So check those out. What else? Tell me something funny that's going on in your life right now. The one thing that I'm like really enamored with right now is the entire Mark Robinson foolishness. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's someone running for governor in North Carolina who just got found out for being like a porn smut enthusiast and a black white supremacist, which is always fascinating. It always feels like satire, but it is real life. Whenever I hear about like a black white supremacist, I always think of like Key and Peele or like Uncle Ruckus. I am royally pissed. It's funny. Anyway, but yeah, is there something funny going on in your local politics or in your life? I love tea. I'm nosy. Put those down in the comment section too. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.